What's up, everybody? This is Killing for Company. My name is Kellen, and this is part 2 of a Blut Aus Nord deep dive. Here with me again, I have Geoff from Metal Madness 66 and Peter from the Metal Vault. So, how you guys doing?
Peter?
Yeah, doing good.
How you doing?
Yeah, busy day. Like I just mentioned before we came on camera about the Viking festivals out today. So
he just opened a bottle of wine, guys, so it could get interesting.
Oh yes, so I may. If you're streaming tonight, I may end up on.
Well, we are on Rick's channel, so I'll get you the I'll get you the link. But real quick, I had a thought there, and where the hell did it go? Oh yeah, just one thing to add that I kind of learned in the last day or two. Blut is not actually blut. It's blut. It's blut. Blut. Yeah, I did look that up. It's Blut Aus Nord, and the actual Aus Nord is not the proper way to. It's missing another. I guess what would it be? A connective type word. If it was to really be done properly in German.
Oh,
right.
There's another word, and I didn't write it down. I forget what it was, but to actually mean blood of the North, there is another little connective tissue in there that I don't know because I don't speak, but I saw it and I'm like, oh, that's interesting. So if we go by definition of the actual words that's in there, it's more like blood of North.
Right. If I can remember my German from school, it would be Blut aus Norden.
I think that might be right. Yeah. Yeah. So
I don't know if when the Vinzwald started the project, these were like, oh, what sounds the best? You know,
what sounds cool. Yeah.
What is versus what is grammatically correct or a proper translation to convey. So today we've got 7 albums ahead of us here. We're just going to be going over the full lengths. If you missed out on the last episode, we covered Ultima Thule in 95 all the way up to Memoria Vetusta. Dialogue with the Stars in 2009. So we're going to cover sort of the back end of the catalog here that really starts with Blut Aus Nord. So his move to Deborah Morty, and the 777 series. So the first one comes out. There were 3 albums I believe were released in 18 months of one another. And Vinzwald does all of them. It's just him for each of these albums.
Right.
So the first one is Sect that comes out here. And it starts the series, which really chronicles sort of a narrative for this. So I know last time, if you tuned in, Peter had a theory about Vinzwald and a sort of narrative arc to his story. I don't know if you picked that up here, that this trilogy was also part of its own sort of trilogy, or if you connected that at all, Peter. But I know this also is, I think, newer to you, correct? This trilogy here?
Yeah. Like I said in part 1, I wasn't as familiar with sects and Desanctification. They came around at a time in my life when kids came along and I was trying to sell and buy a house. So I wasn't banned as much and checking out as much new music. So for me, this is going to be an interesting episode tonight because I had a theory for the first part because I was so used to those songs, so embedded with those albums and that they've done for so long. Some of these ones I'm relatively new to. So yeah, I have my own thoughts on it, and I wonder how it's going to tie in with how you guys perceive these albums.
Now, you mentioned, Kellen, real quick, that there were two major full albums that were splits that came up, and I don't know if you're going to mention those, but I did listen to those, so I can pose some quick thoughts on those. I don't think Peter did listen to them, right? You said, Peter, you didn't get a chance to. And then there is I guess it's the EP trilogy that was initially, I think, a vinyl only initially. It isn't like that now. There is CDs and downloads and whatnot of the what once was. Is that what it is? What once was Liber 1, 2, and 3, which came out too. And I listened to all that today, and I hadn't, and I was a bit surprised by what I heard. So I can pose a couple thoughts on that if you have your timeline there and want to throw that in. So won't waste a lot of time on it, but it'll give some ideas for people.
Yeah, for the sake of just kind of moving through the entirety of the catalog, because there's a lot of albums to go through. But similar to what we did in part one, Peter took the time to look at the side projects that separated Memoria Vetusta, and then what moved into Mystical Beast of Rebellion, that time period, which was relevant.
Right.
So if you at any point during this want to take a moment to pause and talk about the EPs, you're by all means go for it.
Yeah, and it won't be very long. I didn't make super deep notes on those. Those were kind of, I'm listening and getting some vibes from it, and that's about it. I didn't go too deep. So
okay.
But do you have a just to help me a little bit, do you have a timeline there as far as album releases up or no?
Yeah. So here we are, and this is, I think, your entrance, Geoff, right? Is in this 7.
Yeah, I came in. Well, the 777 trilogy is where I came in. I picked up 2 out of the 3 albums, but they came out in, help me out, what years again?
So 2011, we get 2 releases.
11 and then 12.
And then 12 is when Cosmosophy comes out.
Right. Okay. So I picked up Cosmosophy and Desanctification, I want to say 14. Yeah, because where are we now? We're at 22. Yeah, it's been about 8 years that I've known about them. So, and as I said, I picked them up in a used bin for like $4 a piece. They sat in my to listen to pile for probably who knows? You know how the to listen to pile grows, and you get to it when you get to it. But it might have been 6-8 months. And man, as soon as I threw Cosmosophy in, I was like, holy shit.
Well, I think we'll have varying opinions here, because I know how much you just bought the box set for 777.
Yeah, I did.
You're a fan. It's fairly new to Peter. So
yes,
Geoff, why don't you start us off here and get your thoughts here
cool,
on
yeah. So basically, I picked up Desanctification and Cosmosophy, and I think I mentioned this before that are you guys familiar with Rate Your Music, or you weren't familiar, right? You are familiar. Okay.
Yeah.
So it's kind of an online database for where people can write their own reviews, and then there's a numbering system, I think 1 of 5 stars or something like that. And I started to use that quite a bit in the last 10 years when I would be out prospecting in the wild for stuff that I kind of knew what it was, but I didn't really know what it was. So it was like, all right, here's these 2 albums. And frankly, when I saw that name, I knew the name, but I didn't really know anything about them. So I pulled them up in Rate Your Music, and Cosmosophy and all 3 of those albums rate fairly highly in the discography. And I was like, you know what, $4 a piece, yeah, I'm not passing those up. And as I said, it took about 6 months to get around to it. But one day, I believe I was at work, and I threw Cosmosophy in, and I just was like, Jesus Christ, you got to be kidding me, man! What is this sound I'm hearing here? It's so giant and massive and froggy, but yet still dark and kind of evil, but not in the typical evil sense, more metaphysical evil, like more of a perceived evil versus they're talking about Satan. It was not that kind of thing. It was more like, wow, this is some really deep stuff. Now, you guys probably dug into the more nitty gritty of maybe the meanings of things, but I'm looking at it more from a holistic standpoint of the whole picture of it all. And so the weird part of this is, though, that I do not own Sects. And by the way, it's not Sects, it's Sects, Sects, I should point out. And I never owned that on CD. I still don't. I only own it on vinyl. So most of my listening experience with that was done primarily through, listening online. And I had not listened to that in a long, long while, probably 4 or 5 years. So when I went back and listened to it 2 days ago, I have to say, man, I was pretty fucking blown away. I was like, whoa, this is way better than I remembered it. And only because I owned the other two titles did I listen to those more regularly, because I could throw them in the CD changer at the car at work, you know. So real quick, do you want me to run down do you want me to run all three, or just Sect, or do you want me to do
Yeah, we'll just start with the first one.
first
We'll
one? All right.
my piece.
I'm gonna read some notes if you don't mind.
Go for it.
And I'll have to jump out of here, obviously, but you can fix that with editing. And here's what I've got. All tracks on Sects are called Epitome. And that is actually every track from Sects, Desanctification, and Cosmosophy. They're all called Epitomes. So they're kind of, you could almost think of this as one long giant movement over 3 albums cut into segments or pieces, you know, that pertain to one another. So the first one's a banger. It's like a bad dream with cascading guitars and piston-like drums that sear into your brain. Then it goes into a very spooky droning keyboard and percussive part, which is just pure awesomeness. Epitome 2 is an amazing song. Amazing. So fucking good, so epic, and building into a gargantuan ending. Epitome 3 kind of sucks. That's the one I really don't like. It's full-on black metal noise, blasty, grindy, almost grindy. Probably my least favorite track, although the ending is kind of cool because it kind of goes into this drony sort of synth thing. Epitome 4 is a bit long, and it's very unusual to the rest of the catalog because it has a grungy sort of guitar groove to it, but it does have some really cool beats and synths in the background, which are really cool. This recording sounds really, really great, except you can really tell, in my opinion, that the drums are a drum machine. Now, from what I read and heard, Vinzval got a new drum program for this around circa 2010-11, and you can really tell he was going kind of apeshit crazy with, you know, just going nuts with all these options that he had for percussion and drums. The next one, the ending of Epitome 4 is very dissonant, and it's a very unsettling track. Epitome 5 is okay, very industrial and dissonant, but a bit lower down the priority than the prior two songs. Last song is a killer track, though. Epitome 6, right? There's 6 tracks on there?
Yeah.
Because I don't have it. Yeah, Epitome 6 is really, really fantastic too as well. Again, the first 2 tracks on this album are just complete bangers. And Epitome 4, although that's the real long one, I think that's the 11-minute track, somewhere in that range. That one kind of drags a little bit, but it's got a really cool kind of grungy groove to it. And I would give this an 8.5 out of 10. You guys don't have to number them. I'm just doing it because it's kind of what I like to do. So I'd give it an 8.5 out of 10. There was a couple major surprises when I re-listened to this catalog. Some stuff that I thought I didn't like, I fucking loved. Some stuff I thought I liked a lot more, I didn't like as much, which sort of surprised me a little. We'll get to that. But this one rates very high. An 8.5 out of 10 is pretty good on my scale, and I dug it a lot.
Awesome. So from someone who has some a new experience with this record. What do you think, Peter?
Yeah, so for me, initially, from when it first kicked off, my thoughts were, right, we just come from Dialogue with the Stars and that melody, and then typical Finsval, he changes things up. So he's gone back to, like Geoff said, that more dissonant sound, those swirling sort of soundscapes. And it felt to me like a mixture of previous albums, probably around the early mid 2000s. Yeah, so I've put down here just some notes around Epitome 1. One mechanical section at the end reminds me, as a listener, don't be getting too comfortable with this album. He's going to change things up, and he's going to take me in these places that we mentioned before you don't really want to go to, but they end up somehow enjoying. For me too, Epitome 2 for me is the standout song on this one. It does sound massive. This was so fast, large scale. It was world building type song, and you got those martial marching sort of drum beats. Just the electrical, the drum machine. I don't mind with Blut Aus Nord for some reason. That normally it can annoy me a wee bit, but the way he uses it, I've sort of got used to it now. And listening to all these albums over the last few weeks, it's like I get thrown off when he's using a real drummer.
Yeah, good point.
But Epitome 3, kind of agree with her. It's kind of, you get the occasional release in the intensity, but it's only temporary, and then you're just brought back into, again, a sound sort of that it's uncomfortable and you don't really want to be in. And what hit me in the next song, the fourth one, was the depth of the electronic percussion just really, really hits you hard. So it does. So pounding, so forceful. But for me, I know I had a theory about the first one. I'm not really sure that this trilogy for me he's moved from Dialogue with the Stars, where he's touching on like Buddhist meditation techniques. Prior to that, he's in a world of pain and darkness. Here, he's moved into this sort of take on religion, and for me, like organized religion, and where can that take him? What is the evils of organized religion? And I get the feeling that, you know, these pounding beats are wrapped up in the celestial atmosphere. It's almost like he's trying to build something, or that he's looking on people who are trying to build something above the clouds, trying to reach heaven. And I get this idea of the Tower of Babel in my head, and then you get hit with Epitome 6 with that blast, and it's like everything just comes crumbling down. How dare you try to reach God? You know, that's my takeaway from someone who's brand new to this, and what I try to get into Finsval's head, which is probably impossible, but what is he thinking when he's writing these songs? And for me, that's what came to mind. I could be way off, but that was my take on it. And I know we'll get to the rest of the trilogy, but
Can I ask a question here, Kellen?
Yeah.
Do you have access to look something up there while we're talking, or
Sure.
not?
Sure.
I looked this up, and like an idiot, I didn't write them down. But the three titles of the albums have, I believe, some significance. Cosmosophy. There's. Did you look that up, or did you check into that a little bit?
Yeah. So,
okay.
I mean,
why don't we discuss that real quick?
I will, when I get to the conversation about like the narrative here for this sort of protagonist and the concept.
Okay.
So it's cool, Peter, to kind of get your thoughts, you know, coming from this brand new and tying into the last part. Is there anything else you wanted to add to that? Or you?
For my view, no, that kind of wraps things up.
Okay.
I was just going to say, I don't want to get ahead of myself, but in the trilogy, I like this one a lot, actually.
I think too, it might be important to note that where in the past, Vince Vaughn was using, W.D. Feld, quote unquote, was doing the percussion. And I got to be honest with you, I don't think there is a W.D. Feld. I'm just going to be blunt with you.
The running theme for this deep
I don't want to blow it for everybody, but I truly think that Vince Vaughn is all these guys. But anyway, except for the dude that comes in and starts doing real live drums, which that guy, I forget, Thorns, is that his name?
Thorns, yeah.
Right. So that's a real dude. And I could be very wrong. And I read a lot of threads in Encyclopedia Metallum today about that whole thing, like 3 pages worth of people speculating whether W.D. Feld and Ghost, whatever, are real people. And the more I think about the linear way that he records, the way that the music comes out, I just don't see it. But I could be completely wrong. And his narrative has switched. It's ambiguous at best with the way he talks about the band. So anyways, the point I was going to make was in those first 6 or 7 albums, we do 7, right? The first ones, you can tell in this new trilogy, he's upgraded his software and there's some new stuff going on because he really digs deep down, or whoever's doing the percussion and the drums, whoever's doing that suddenly has a brand new toy, and you can tell. Because these albums are very percussive, very drum heavy, and there's a lot of nuances and differences to them. You can still tell it's a drum machine, at least I can. But there's a hell of a lot more going on. So enter the more industrial side of things, which you could argue that Odinist and Mort had was the beginning of that, and this was a more of a natural melodic extension of that, but it's there. It's a lot of drums. So go ahead, Kel.
Okay, so there's a few things I guess I'll add to your kind of build off what you had established there, Geoff.
Mm-hmm.
I completely agree, and we kind of talked about this last time. The move to De Bibmir Morti feels, I think, not only an upgrade in terms of like production quality, investment from the label. I think he's completely sort of free to artistically do whatever he wants at this point in time.
Right.
So kind of building off what you had mentioned. And then I know Peter last time talked about like, and I think this will be increasingly true throughout this deep dive, is how much do we negotiate Blut Aus Nord and a genre like black metal? Because at some point in time, I listened to this and I don't really go into it thinking like, I know back in the day, like in the most abstract way, he was always tying himself like this is a feeling, an emotion that I'm expressing.
Right.
Not like an orthodox way to play an instrument or so on and so forth, much
Right.
less be a part of a scene, right? I think he's
right.
completely disinterested in that. But I do think that like I listen to these records, they're just really interesting, dark, heavy music, and I think he's very much comfortable if it makes it not a black metal album. That's
he's in his own universe
for sure.
Yeah.
So the next part I kind of wanted to get into is the trilogy and a theme or artistic statement. So what I came across in terms of his idea and expressing this trilogy, I'll just pull it from my notes here. A concept about the consequences of the progressive negation of the pure instinct in favor of this fear generated by time. We create this time and we undergo this time. So this protagonist is just sort of struggling with this idea of society or a earthly world has given me this notion of time, consequence, and fear. And this is a protagonist's attempt to liberate oneself from that. To your point, Geoff, about desanctification meaning something, he described it as a brutal admission of failure. So the way that mankind or individuals ascribe their own sense of self-worth and meaning, it's about like this record is probably in the trilogy the most aggressive, the most punishing. When I was listening to it, I thought it was closest in terms of being an industrial record or pulling out of mythical beast, and the work which transforms God.
Wait, sex was or desanctification?
Yeah.
Okay, all right. Yeah, I agree.
I think it is the most aggressive out of the three.
Yeah, I agree.
And I think that is part of this sort of process of an individual trying to purge themselves of, notions of self-worth, ego, earthly concerns, right?
Right.
That's kind of a theme throughout Blut Aus Nord, but I think here we have like a concentrated theme that is going to explore a trajectory specifically over the next two records.
Okay, yeah.
I think it was Peter in the last time was talking about the work which transforms God. You hear the first track off that record and you're like, oh, it's kind of a continuation of where Mystical Beast was. And then the second track comes on.
Yep.
And
then there's the change.
A whole different, yeah.
Yep.
I had that experience because I had been a long time with like Geoff since I listened to this album. And I was like, this is okay. Now I feel we're part of 777. This trilogy is now in effect. We have, this is him turning a new page. The first track kind of gave me a dose of something familiar. But the next track, when I got there, it was like, okay, we're kind of doing something different. And it's to your point about every single track being named epitome and then just being part of a chapter. Like, I don't know if it would be an amazing live performance.
Oh my God.
But if you could do the entire run, like
Jesus Christ,
of this, because I think that's how it's intended to be listened to.
I think you're right. Yep.
I think you're supposed to sort of run through the entire sort of the breadth of this to kind of get the point.
But each album stands on its own. Each track stands on its own. And the one thing, to your point, where you said the thing that I'm going to make a statement real quick here.
Okay.
And for the people that are watching this, I don't want it to be a deterrent. I want you to hear what I'm saying. I've been listening to Blut Aus Nord for about 10 days straight. A little bit each day, sometimes a lot each day. Not every day. I mean, there was a day or two where I was like, all right, I'm going to take a break. I'm wiped out. Like, I'm not lying. I'm wiped out. Like I'm up here. I'm tapped. And that's a good thing. It's not a bad thing. It's just that you really have to focus. You really have to put an effort into listening to these albums. They're not background music. They're focus music. And that sounds kind of all, I don't know. What's the word I'm looking for here? Precocious, or like, I'm look at me, I'm so cool, I can listen to all this stuff. No, it's deep stuff. There's a lot going on in these songs. There's a lot going on these albums, album to album. And the one thing that I think you can say about Blut Aus Nord is he sounds like nobody else. His music there's a few albums that have, you can point to, there's the Bathory influence, there's the Immortal influence, there's the, okay, you can say that stuff, but you really can't say it about every album. You can always say it about moments. And the importance of that is that, and you said it, is this stuff really black metal? Yes, but not really. It's it's much bigger than that. It's much more encompassing that, and there's so much going on, and there's so many small little tangential changes each song in each album that sometimes you might go, well, that kind of sounded like the last one. Ooh, that doesn't sound like the last one. Ooh, what's that? That's what I kept finding myself doing all the way through. And I got to tell you, I'm not going to listen to Blut Aus Nord for a little while after tonight. I'm just not. Not because I don't love them, because I do. Probably my favorite black metal whatever project. They're avant-garde, man. They're just very. Yes, they use the aesthetics of black metal. Yes, they use some aesthetics of death metal. Yes, they use a lot of aesthetics of prog metal and progressive music and industrial, but they're really none of those things. They don't really fit in any of those niches very well. Black metal is probably the only one that comes close to fitting in close, but it's not really there. And so, I want to say, if anybody's watching this, oh, that he's a big fan, but he's now telling me I can't listen to them anymore. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is I'm wiped the fuck out from listening to 19 albums. I'm tapped out here. And I'm just
I totally agree.
I need a break. I need to listen to the Bee Gees or something like that for a little while. Yeah, whatever, I guess I'm a poser, but it's the truth. So go ahead. Sorry.
No,
Just
it's
wanted to
okay.
make that point.
No, for sure. It's a very. I mean, I know we've touched on this, but you're absolutely right. Like, and he's been outspoken about wanting to be that kind of a band. He did not. He likes the idea of continually pushing into something new, dramatically different.
Right.
And I think for a lot of people who are confused or hesitant to get into Blut Aus Nord, it's because they are trying to corner it in a certain place to where they can potentially understand it. And if that's the kind of band you're into, this is the wrong
band for you. Exactly.
Especially if you want to go through the entire discography, like,
yeah.
Good luck. You're going to be dissatisfied at some point.
Yeah, you're gonna quit and give up very quickly, right. And that's not. This is a band you have to work at a little bit, and it's or a lot bit at times, and it's deep and heady stuff, and that's that's just the music side of it. For me, I'm saying it's deep and heady stuff because I haven't really paid any attention to the lyrical content, and he doesn't provide a lot of lyrical content. But if you really want to dig down into that, and maybe the more metaphysical elements of the whole trip, so to speak, good luck. I'm just talking digging into the music takes some effort and some work. It's very rewarding in the end. I think it's extremely rewarding. Maybe one of the biggest rewards I've ever had in a band, but you're just not going to pop it in and go, "Oh yeah, dude, I'm banging my head now." It's just not going to happen. That's not what they are.
I think from listening to all these albums over the last 2 weeks, I've gained an even greater appreciation of Vince Val and his skills as a musician, but his thought process, his artistic vision, where he wants to go in, and he always says everything's a progression. He doesn't just, like I said last time, he doesn't do phases. For him, it's a progression of what he's done before. Though interesting when it comes to Saturnian Poetry, I did find, and again, these are rare, an interview with him at the Terrorizer magazine for the release of that album. Where he mentions a few wee things we could probably read out later. But I just want to go back to, Kellen, your point about the sort of what do these mean? And you talk about the ego, and was it the release from the ego or trying to escape from the ego? I mean, it's interesting because I studied morality and ethics when I did scholastic philosophy as part of my degree. And we studied all about the id and the ego and how it all feeds into the Godhead, which becomes good. And if he's trying to get away from that, then where I think he's talking about people trying to reach God, but then it all comes crashing down. And then I think he's trying to get away from God. I think as this trilogy goes to. So if you're trying to get away from God, you're trying to get away from your ego and from your id. So it's weird that you come up with that sort of different take on it.
That's a really good,
but it's kind of
interesting
connected.
point.
Okay, well that's a perfect segue into Desanctification. So we get here. This is just, I think, so I can get the exact months here, but I believe Sect comes out in April, and we get Desanctification in November. So it's a pretty fast sort of transition. And I don't know, this for me personally, this is one of my favorite, and I think the most unique out of the trilogy. But I'm interested to get your thoughts, Geoff. What do you think of Desanctification?
Yeah, let me give you some thoughts on this one because I really like this album. So, again, this was one of the first two BAN albums I bought, and I don't remember which one I listened to first. It doesn't really matter, but so again, we're continuing with the epitomes. Starts with Epitome 7. It's a very droning industrial machine-like beginning. Super cool, super fucking spooky synths behind a wall of really epic guitars. I love that first track. Epitome 8 is a droning, nasty bunch of riffage that's very hypnotic. IX, which I guess is 9. Yes, I'm trying to remember my Roman numerals. Is a very languid, moody interlude, which we get several of those throughout the next two albums. Just small 1 to 3 minute interludes, usually synthesizers, sometimes some soaring guitars and some spooky voices that you hear. And what we come to for that, I believe, if I'm correct, because I don't have a copy in front of me, Epitome 10. That's the long track on there. Help me out.
There's a few, but I do think that like dead center of the album, let me pull it up here for you. Oh yeah, Epitome 10 is about a little over like 7.5 minutes.
Okay, so that one has a weird fade in that sounds like it was mid song. That was an odd thing, and I don't know if that was just on the stream I was listening to, or if it's like that on my CD. I'd have to look at that. I didn't actually, but it kind of cuts in like it's starting somewhere in the middle of the song, which is odd. But what you got on Epitome 10 is you got a much more pronounced, gnarly, nasty vocal behind a mid-paced chugging bunch of riffs with a lot of dissonance that resolves into a really cool, uplifting jam sequence. It's very atmospheric. My only complaint would be there's a little bit of the gargoyle sneering vocals that kind of get a little funky on here. It's, for me, Vinzval, especially early on, and even up through some of this trilogy up until maybe Memoria Vetusta 3, the weakest part of band for me is Vinzval's vocals. It's not that they suck. It's not that they're bad. It's just that sometimes he vacillates between, the shrieking, howling black metal banshee, and then he kind of gets into one of those little sort of trollish voices like this. And that's the only cheese that he brings to the dinner. Let's see, where are we at here? There's some very weird, dissonant, grungy chords on that song that I really, really like, and they're kind of unusual for his sound. I can't give you a timestamp because I didn't go that deep. Epitome 11, really drony, almost Middle Eastern sounding thing that, quite frankly, reminded me very much of a Killing Joke song off of Pandemonium. And then Epitome, let's see, it also has a little bit of a Sisters of Mercy vibe to it, which is unique for that song. So it's really deep and hypnotic, almost groovy percussion, drums on this one with ambient washes in the background. Pretty wicked, moody piece. I really, really like Epitome 11. Epitome 12 has a weird drum thing going on that bugs me at the beginning. I'm not sure what it was. It's almost like it's too slow. The drums seem to be like figuring out where they're going to fall into the groove. I kind of want it to be faster and heavier, but it's being held back by the synths and guitars, which are very cool. Lots of choral-like vibes to it, and some haunting, spooky melodies. You're going to hear a lot of the same words come up with my descriptions. And then 13, Epitome 13 wraps up nicely with an off-tempo, sort of almost jazzy, weird, ascending guitar line, synth line. And this is the word I used, a jazzy, weird building guitar synth orgasm as it builds for the climax of the song. Killer way to end the album with this swarm of bees like sounding, and it's also got a little bit of a trip hop thing at the very end there. Again, my only major problem with BAN at all is the synthetic drumming, which I'm not a huge fan of overall, which is odd because I love Skinny Puppy and Frontline Assembly, but when it comes to metal and guitars, I like to hear real drums with guitars. That's just me. But these new drum program that he's got allows him a lot more latitude, and he does a lot more with it. So again, this is an easy 8.5 out of 10 for me. Only the vocal bits there's a few vocal bits that bug me, and some of the drum programming is minor. So, that's my take on it. It's another sonic assault. It's the recording and mixing is amazing, as most of his stuff is, especially from this period on. I would say probably from Mort onwards, he really, really started to nail what the essence of his recordings are, his mixing and all that stuff like that. So, yeah, that's where I've got. It's fucking killer album.
Peter, what are your thoughts?
Okay, I probably listened to this probably for the first time yesterday.
Okay.
So yeah, I mean, you got the first song, Epitome 7. You got those industrial sort of beats coming in, but I struggled a wee bit with the next song, Epitome 8. It wasn't immediate, and I felt it very difficult to grasp on to something in this song. I even put down a question: am I becoming weary of Blut Aus Nord at this point after listening for so much over the last 2 weeks or whatever? But then I put down a later comment. Actually, you need patience for this song and this album, but you will be rewarded if you give it the time. Because I had to go back to, and I think I must listen to this about 3 times in a row yesterday afternoon. It is very oppressive. It's impenetrable, at times monotonous, but then you get a bit of relief coming with the melodic sort of lead parts. So you do get this glimpse of light at the end of the tunnel. And I think it's key to go back to that patience point for this album for me, for coming out new. And if anyone else has never heard it before and wants to listen to it, bear with it. The interlude in Epitome 9, it kind of threw me a bit. There's almost like a spacey sitar
right
interlude.
Yeah, that's the one with the Middle Eastern sort of vibes in it. Yeah.
Yeah, well, I've got Middle Eastern actually in my notes for Epitome 11.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, maybe it was 11. I'm sorry. Yeah, well, it was 11. You're right.
But Epitome X, I really like that one actually, or 10, sorry. It's got that weird industrial sort of beat at the start, and then it develops and I really like that bit. But Epitome 11, yeah, got hints of the Middle Eastern vibes. And I detected some kind of laughter during that song.
Yeah.
It's like Vince felt laughing at me. I mean,
Yeah.
You're enduring this. And I'm
No,
laughing at you.
he's going. He's going, ha, 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 ha. Peter, I'm going to get you to buy more of my albums.
Oh yeah. Well,
Or
he's right because
CDs,
I
rather.
have ordered this.
Of course you have.
Epitome 12. I don't know if you guys heard this, but there's kind of like a ringing noise in the background, which is very disorientating for me.
Yeah, I
At the
did
start.
notice that. It almost
Yeah,
sounds like a phone's ringing or like a fax like sort
yeah.
of thing. It's weird. I did notice
And,
that.
and, and eventually fades out.
Yeah.
But I really like that track too. Very atmospheric at times. Got those industrial rhythms, and then you got your typical Vince Val guitar sort of layering coming over everything. And it feels very familiar. And then at Epitome 13, I thought that song closed out the album really strongly, so it did. But yeah, like I said, probably listened to it for the first time yesterday, so those are my initial thoughts on it.
Yeah, those are good thoughts for such a limited time with the record.
I mean, yeah, like the first listen, I was like, I don't know if I'm gonna. I came out of it thinking I don't like this at all. I'm not sure if I like it or not.
Wow.
But again, going back in again 2 or 3 times after, and I was like, oh, I'm hearing slightly different things, and yes, I understand where it's maybe going with this. It's this following on from the first one where they were trying to build towards God and through the clouds, and then it come crashing down, and this is the aftermath of that. I don't know.
The funniest part of that whole thing that you just said there was, I don't know if I like this at all, but I have it on order.
No, after the third time, I realized I liked it. So yeah.
What did we say? What did I say a little while back when I said I was kind of burnt out on BAN? But you gotta give it time, man. It is you. This ain't like eating chicken wings, man. You know what I mean? This is like you're getting an 8-course dinner. You can't just suddenly jump to the French fries. You're getting your sorbet. You're not your sorbet. You're getting your souffle, your appetizer. It just works in that procession, and it's a weird analogy, I know, and I'm not hungry, by the way. But
I think that should be a Jeff-ism.
A Jeff-ism?
This ain't chicken wings.
Sorbet and Blut Aus Nord. Yeah.
This ain't chicken wing. It ain't a thing. It ain't my chicken wing. But yeah, man. I mean, so go ahead, Kellen. I want to hear about it from you because it sounds like this one might have been your favorite of the three.
For the trilogy, so I guess I'll start this with the concept part of it. So for me, the first one is like an individual trying to disarm notions of human self-worth, religion, God, things like that. Like that record is the fight, is the battle, is the trying to get rid of preconceived notions that humanity has, right? And that's why it sounds on the aggressive end. So Vince Vaughn said in an interview that this is the moment when man disowns God, which is really interesting considering what you just, given your background, Peter, that, but it's a moment of solitude, of monumental solitude in this record. So for me, and it's a middle point, meaning we get the first record that is the fight to get rid of religion, notions of God, so on and so forth. Then once we get here, it's okay, what's now? So there's this moment of emptiness, of space, of solitude, where before we can understand, I think the way he phrased it is before learning of freedom, of instinct, of pure life, man has to disown God. And in this moment, we are alone, or this protagonist is alone. And that sort of absence of direction and meaning, that's what we get on Desanctification. Which is why I think it is such an odd sort of slow-paced kind of record. It is very much to me I don't if it's ambient or trance is maybe a good way to put it.
Well, it's very mid-pace. It's mid-pace.
Right. It does not have that like driving aspect.
No.
And I don't even sense on that great, like I don't understand this record as sort of like I'm going to a particular direction. That trajectory element, I don't have a whole lot of, especially early on. I think the best tracks, if the ones that you were talking about, come later on the record. I have tracks 11 and 12 circled as well, or epitome 11 and 12, I should say.
Right.
And it's interesting on 12, you mentioned that ringing. Like I wrote in my notes, like this song has a lot of odd bells and whistles. It's just like little pieces that, when you talk about like at this point, the production quality of these records, he's not making any compromises. And if he wants to, step up the production quality or include small little additions to these, he has probably the budget, the time, the support to do so. And this record's full of them. And I also think it's a unique one. Now, we did talk a little bit on, I think it's on The Work Which Transforms God. There's a track called The Howling of God.
Yes.
And if you remember, that one had an interesting kind of drum beat to it.
Yeah, the trip hop beat.
Yeah, and when I heard that track, I was like, man, this is Desanctification. Like he has this in him, but on this record, it's like he has the entire scope of a record to explore this part of his, artistry.
Writing, right.
So that's what this whole record is dedicated to. And I don't think, like, on its own, once again, why this would be great as a trilogy in a single listening. You need to kind of go through the battle and understand the aftermath, which is, I think, what this is, before we get to where we're headed, which is this moment of arrival within the trilogy. And I know that how much you are passionate about that record, Geoff. So I'm really interested to get your thoughts when we get there. But I think this is this moment of calm or absence. And I think that's why most people kind of don't know what to do with it. It's kind of got like a little bit of a trip hop sort of thing going on. But
there's a lot more nuance in the second record in Desanctification. By that I mean there's a lot more influences that came into the four, and again, it's nothing like I can say, oh, that song sounds like a death metal song. Oh, that song sounds like a black metal song. That song sounds like a whatever, a Yezu track or something like that. Because we're gonna reference Justin Broderick and some other of his projects later, because there is some very definitive influence of those things later. But it's just kind of the whole stew, if you will, is on this album, he brings a lot of disparate types of genres into the mix and comes up with Blut Aus Nord.
Right.
Because again, you could definitely hear he has a much wider palette to work from now with regards to software as far as his drum program. I mean, I don't know this for a fact, but I read it somewhere that for these albums, he was able to upgrade his software and get a lot more, out there drum programming to at his disposal. And I can hear it on these three albums for sure. What I think that allows him to do is it allows him to shift out of all I'm going to do is play blast beats. Not that that's what he did all the time on the other albums, but if you look at the first 7 albums, probably the blast beat quotient then compared to where we're going is probably pretty vastly one-sided in that first half of the catalog. Whereas now we're hearing all kinds of off-time rhythms. We're hearing a lot of trip hoppy and industrial type beats and things like that, and it's like, whoa, this is a whole new dynamic. So I think that's kind of where we're at, and I think we have to say this. Vinzvold's stuff has always been progressive because that's kind of one of his mantras is to be progressing album to album and whatever he does in terms of eras or however he looks at his music. I know he looks at it as one continuous sort of flow, workflow, so to speak. But I do still feel you can pigeonhole certain albums with each other. Okay. What I think now starts to happen now, particularly with Memoria Vetusta, the writing on Memoria Vetusta 2, we have to use the dirty word, man. The P word is in full effect. There is massive amount of progressiveness going on here. And I don't necessarily mean, oh, geez, now it suddenly sounds like yes. But the dynamics of what he is doing is expanding. And, that may be because he's got better drum programs, better guitar plugins, a better computer, who knows? Will say this too, and I don't know this is fact. So Vinzvold, if you're watching, please comment or contact one of us. But I would not be shocked at all if he's doing a lot of the recording unto himself. Like I don't think he's traveling to some gigantic, expensive studio. So you mentioned earlier about Debamir Morty. I can never say that name right. And a better budget. I think the biggest point that you made and the most important one is he's unshackled. He can do whatever he wants. And those guys trust that whatever he does is going to be amazing and it's going to be pure BAN. And so I don't even know that he needs a gigantic budget in terms of, maybe he wants to upgrade software packages and get a new guitar or whatever. I mean, that kind of stuff, or get an Ebo or whatever. But I don't think Debamir Morty's walking up to him and going, hey, man, here's $400,000. Go to whatever studio you want. Sure. He's going to go, I'm going to work in my studio. I bet, again, just like Gost and W.D. Feld, I don't think they exist. I think Vinzvold does his thing in his own environment. It wouldn't shock me at all to find out he's recorded all that shit in his bedroom or something like that. You know what I mean?
For sure. Okay, so we're going to move from your point here and the dirty P word, if you will, into Cosmosophy, because
go ahead. Before we do, could I just pick up a couple of things? Go for it. I think it's interesting when you talk about after the battle. This is the aftermath, and it's about, well, where do we go next? And it's funny, when I wrote my notes down and I read through them, when I first heard this, I was like, it wasn't immediate, and I was to be able to grasp onto anything in the sound. So it's interesting, that connection there, for someone who's come at this relatively new. And another thing there, you mentioned, Geoff, about trip hop, and you're going to obviously Justin Broderick's down the line, but I know in the first part, part one, so I referenced The Cure and some old post-punk.
Yeah, you did. Yeah, you did.
I have a reference coming up in the next one.
Okay.
Need to hear me out on, but I just want to point out too, obviously I like to look into all the background of these things, and like I said, I'm new to this album. The artwork is done by the same fella who's done some recent Amorphous artwork. Particularly in the new album, Halo, which when I read that, I was like, oh yeah, I didn't see the connection before. I see this artwork.
Okay, so he did all the 777 stuff, or no?
No, there's different artists for it.
Each album?
This one is by an artist known as Foul Noir.
Okay.
But when I was reading about it, this person has done artwork for a few of the Amorphous' recent albums, particularly Halo is one that stood out from him. When I seen Halo, I went, all right. I don't know if you've seen that album when it came out this year, so it did very similar style. So
that's a good thing you pointed that out, because while I love the artwork, and I love most of the artwork that all these albums encompass, I don't pay super close. That's one of the details I usually don't pay super close attention to. Although he's got a big name coming up on an album or two soon, doing the artwork for him, which you guys know, I'm sure. So, you want me to jump into Cosmosophy?
Yeah, let's do it. I know that's
All
a
right.
favorite of yours, so I'm interested here.
Yeah, I love this album, man, and it's just all right. Let's see what I got here. So of the three, I'm not gonna, I'm not gonna. It's already well known out there. This is my favorite of the albums, and it's probably my favorite album. Although Memoria Vetusta 2 is very close, and there's a couple other ones we'll talk about towards at the end. But Epitome 14 opens this album with such a massive, gargantuan sound. It's so fucking epic sounding. Like this is what I feel like. I envision this. Okay, I envision riding on the back of a fire-breathing dragon as with a giant broadsword in my hand as we fly over lakes of burning gasoline. That's what I feel like when I listen to this song and the next one, man. They're so fucking epic and sweeping and crushing. For me, this album is Vince Vaugh's best guitarscape and cinematic-scape album in his incredible body of work. There have been a lot of great albums in there, like Memoria Vetusta 2 and 3 and Hallucinogen, but this album is just so evocative of glaciers and mountains and storms and lakes of gasoline on fire. I keep going back to that. Before the release of MV3 and Hallucinogen, this was Vin Vaugh's most proggy album to my ears. And still, these songs on this album, especially the last song and XVI, which is 16, yes, they're just incredible. The second track is a bit of a nightmarish trip hop spoken word intro bit that kicks in with killer guitarscapes and epic Gregorian choral chants that are amazing. 16 opens with this haunting, watery bunch of clean notes, then kicks in with with a thunderous batch of building monstrous riffs and clean singing, which is probably only, again, my negative about the album is that Vince Vaugh's vocals on a couple of the tracks are a little louder than they had been, and his clean singing has gotten better, but on this album, he's still sorting it out a little bit, I think. That would be my only real criticism of the album. This one has massive riffs. I feel like, as I said, I had a lot of really fucking weird like visuals with this one. And this is one you're really probably going to get sick at. This one has some massive riffs. I feel like I should be climbing Everest in a Speedo while listening to this shit. So this track is generally badass and full of chugging riffery while he plays some rare solos on the Epitome 17, which is next up. For me, this is a 9.75. It's right there with MV2 as far as my favorite BAN release. So I could have gone on and on with all the hyperbole, but it just seemed, I just kept coming over Speedos, Lakes of Fire, and gasoline, and all kinds of weird shit like that. So
Okay.
amazing,
Yes.
amazing album. And if I was to point someone at this band right off the bat, this is the one I would point to them. I remember I was working part-time at a auto parts store a couple years ago, and I was always in charge of the stereo. Like nobody fucked with the stereo but me. I'm like, nope, you can't listen to that. I've got to listen to this. And one day it might be, Jethro Tull or Porcupine Tree or Tool or whatever. But this day I threw in Blut Aus Nord, both these albums. And the one guy I worked with, he never really liked much rock music. He's like, shit's pretty badass, man. Who is this? I'm like, you'll have no idea who it is. I told him, he's like, oh man, does he like worship? It's black metal. Does he worship Satan? I'm like, maybe. I don't know. I have no idea. He could. Who knows? But yeah, this album is the one I would always point people to start with. This or one that's coming up. So
Awesome. Okay, well, Peter, did this have you dreaming of Everest and Speedos?
Yikes.
That's an interesting point there. I did not think of that at all. I suppose I'll just get this out of the way since I was talking about artwork before. So the artwork of this one is done by the same fella who did Hallucinogen.
Okay.
Don't know if you realised that, but
Didn't know that.
I
No.
was a wee bit more familiar with this album. I've had it for maybe 2-3 years now. CD, not something I listen to that often, but for me, listening to this album, obviously the melody starts to re-emerge. It's a bit more prominent in this album. The clean vocals are coming through in this one. Epitome 14 is for me, it was very spiritual sounding. It's very pensive, very deliberate in its feel, atmospheric. Epitome 15, you got those break beats in that song. And for me, I put down here, it was probably one of the most unique songs in his whole discography.
Oh, for sure.
Epitome 16, you got the clean guitars, other influences starting to creep through in his sound. I know there's some people have mentioned in some of the reviews I was reading post-black metal. I don't know if it's gone that far, but it's definitely an expansive sound on that song. And Epitome 17, it's uplifting. In the world of Blut Aus Nord, it is a very uplifting song. And then you move on to Epitome 18. I'm detecting the sound of hope in Vince Val's world, in his universe. It's almost trance-like piece. There's your industrial bass, the typical Blut Aus Nord melodic guitars interwoven between the rhythms. And these are songs that are like bathed in light. And this is where I got the sort of outside influence. I put about 5 question marks after this. Is this the metal equivalent of early The Orb?
Early who?
Particularly The Orb's adventures beyond the Ultra World.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Which
I don't
is
necessarily.
one of my top 10 albums ever.
Yeah, I have a bunch of Orb. I don't know if I have that one. Is that the one with a finger on it?
No, it's a debut album. It's got little fluffy
it's a
clouds
debut.
on it.
Okay, yeah, I actually don't have that one. That's the one I don't own. I have
It's
all
a double
the
album.
Okay.
It is one of my favorite albums of all time. The follow-up UF4 was also
that's one. That's great. Yeah.
It's those early albums. It's that journey they're taking through the universe, and after all, the album is called Cosmosophy, which is the understanding and knowledge of the cosmos. So is this? We talked about the first album. For me, I thought it was like he's talking about people trying to reach out to connect with God. That's been rejected. They're in the aftermath. Well, what is there? What is existence all about? So then they're now looking like this is where the light comes through. It's the universe. It's all out there. The answers are out there somewhere, and you have to make sense of them yourself. So for me, it was that's sort of general views on it. Very uplifting, very serene, very positive. There's hope in this album.
Yes, very
For
much
me,
so.
it rounds out the trilogy really well, and I think this is a trilogy where in the first part, with the first 7 albums or 8 albums, whatever, I had this I thought there was this overall theme throughout it. I think in the second part, I didn't find an overall theme, but I think there's themes within each section. In a way.
That makes sense. Yeah.
And in particularly this trilogy. So, I really like this album. And there's obviously all those progressive elements that you talked about in detail, Geoff. But
there's no question. You're right about one thing. It is probably, along with one more that's coming up here, it's probably the most uplifting spiritual feeling. It has this sort of I don't want to call it light, because nothing he does is light. And by light, I mean, weight light. I mean, it's just there's a optimism in these songs that you don't often hear in a lot of his other stuff, because, and not that his other shit is mega dark. It's just there's a lot more dynamics to a lot of the other stuff, and there is a lot of darkness in his shit. But this album is really full of beautiful melodies, man, just beautiful melodies and epic sounding stuff. And the funny thing is, you guys know me. I think, Kellen, you know me pretty well. I'm not a power metal dude. And the reason I don't like power metal is because usually it's too yo ho ho and a bottle of rum cheery cheery stuff. I know I'm simplifying it. But like the German power metal, I struggle with a lot of it because it's just too sing-songy. You don't have that in that. This is not that. It's these incredible building melodies that just they just keep piggybacking on each other and getting larger and larger and larger until it's like you just feel like it's around you. The sound is all around you and it's all in you, and you're like, this is fucking epic, man. And that's why I said climbing Everest in a Speedo. It's only 40 below zero out there, but I could do it in a Speedo, no problem. That kind of thing. So
Well,
with listening to
it's
this,
interesting you mentioned light, because the one interview I did find from this period of the band, it's him talking about the release of Saturnian Poetry.
Mhm.
And he mentions that, as far as he's concerned, that album, which we'll come to, and the 7/7 trilogy on a spiritual level are identical. And he says here, the thought process behind the 7/7 series and the new album are but one. Both Cosmosophy and Saturnian Poetry's final track are bathed in light, a light as the ultimate form of subversion, which is an interesting quote.
The ultimate form of subversion?
Yep, subversion.
Wow. That's pretty fucking deep.
Yeah.
In fact, I think I'm way too stupid to even understand that, but it sounds good though.
Sounds on point. I could absolutely
For me, I don't know. My takeaway from that quote is, okay, he's escaped from the shackles of organized religion. He's looking out to the universe. Anything's possible. See, when you have that type of free thought, the authorities that be will see that as subversive. How dare you think for yourself? How dare you?
I got you.
Yeah.
Okay, that makes a lot more sense then. Yeah. All right, Kellen, your turn, man.
All right. Well, I don't have too much to add here, because I agree essentially where we've kind of been talking about for the past handful of minutes. This feels like the right place to end. This record feels like a sense of arrival within the trilogy, at least. I have melodies and harmonies galore written in my notes. This album I think is just 5. We have here about almost all 10 minutes long. It's 45 minutes with 5 tracks.
Right.
And to your point of them just sort of building on one another, I also want to highlight, I think for someone like you, Geoff, who've had a issue with his vocals, his sung vocals on this record have never been highlighted as much.
Yeah.
I think his singing here is a highlight on this. They stand out. In particular for me, it's Epitome 17, and they have the translated vocals here, which is how many seasons beyond this sacred life, how many treasons beyond this clever lie.
Wow.
And that's, I think he repeats that refrain during the course of the track.
And those are deep lyrics right there. That's pretty
For
good
sure.
shit. Yeah.
But from someone who's, to your point, Peter, about trying to discard notions of deception through sort of false lies about humanity and all that. So, yeah, it just, I agree with so much that's been said. You know, this record does feel like you open up sort of this space for a whole lot more light. And we were talking about that. Blut Aus Nord is a challenging, like there are plenty of barriers to entry when
Oh
listening.
yeah.
To,
Big time.
and this record, I think, feels, you know, is obviously designed to be paired with the previous two, which are a bit more of a challenge, I think, sonically, at least in terms of.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
This feels like, because of its melodic and harmonic qualities, there's just, it's a sense of like relief a little bit. And that's why I'm kind of getting at with a moment of arrival. I do want to, when I thought about this record, Geoff, and how I knew how much you were into it, he's talked about, I don't know if you like the French band Magma.
Yeah. Yeah. They're very, you want to talk about challenging. Holy shit, man. That's a challenging band to get into. And I'm not crazy about the vocals because they speak in their own language. They made up their own language. It's I forget what it's even called. Do you remember Komich or something like that? Or
I don't recognize, like, because I
yeah.
look at the album titles and I'm.
But Christian Vander, the drummer and the main guy in the thing, and he's I think he's like 75 years old and still out there touring. That band is something I've been trying to get into for 22 years. I've had a little success, but it's a struggle. Only because I think I just am not sharp enough to get it. It's almost too much to understand. But you're talking about absolute virtuosos on every instrument. That drum, I mean, Christian Vander, the drummer, fucking just absolutely unreal, unbelievable. Everyone in the band is a you know, they're a phenom at their instruments. So
Right.
yeah, that's a good point. He's
Yeah.
into them, I assume, a lot. Yeah.
He talked about the influence that they had on him, in particular elements of their choral arrangements.
Right.
Because I mean, the part of Magma is not just, to your point, like these kind of spiritual successors of what Coltrane had established, but like their live show is also this element of theater.
Oh yeah, it is.
So
it's overwhelming.
Anyway, like that kind of heady prog, he's talked about the influence that Magma had on him.
See, I did not know that. So that really makes that makes everything that much like clear to me, because you know, as much as I love my dudes in Rush and I love my dudes in Marillion and I love my dudes in Yes and all that stuff, yeah, Magma's on a kind of a different level when it comes to their progressive music. They're I'll give you a good example. You know, we always in metal or hard rock we talk about guys like Eddie Van Halen, and we talk about Yngwie, and we talk about Dimebag and Hendrix. You know, those cornerstone guitarists that influence generation of players. There's one guy that rarely gets talked about, and there's a reason why. Because usually only guitarists listen to this guy, and he's on another he's in another solar system. That guy's Alan Holdsworth. And Alan Holdsworth played with UK. He played with I'll think of it.
Okay.
And I mean, and he had a solo career that, you know, I know. Are either of you guys familiar with Holdsworth?
I'm not.
I mean, you brought up Coltrane. Holdsworth is like the Coltrane of rock guitar. I mean, he's out there in another universe, and most people, Eddie Van Halen's favorite guitar player, Alan Holdsworth. Steve Vai's favorite guitar player, Alan Holdsworth. And these are guys that, you know, are masters of their music, of their instruments. So this makes sense that Vander's Magma project influenced Vinzval that much, because you can just see the progression over these 19 albums, and it's kind of astonishing in a lot of ways.
And I think all of them, that element of spiritualism that connects with their music, I think that's also present here.
Part of it. Okay, yeah.
Okay, well, I think we're ready to let go of Cosmosophy and move on here. Anyone have final words or thoughts that you wanted to add to this series?
Nope, just if you're looking to start in BAN, that's a great place to start.
Okay, so we moved. That was, by the way, from 2012. So 2 years later, here we get Memoria Vetusta 3, Saturnian Poetry. So this is the conclusion of, or I suppose a conclusion. We'll
maybe not.
Maybe.
I heard there might be a part 4. I'm hearing there's a part 4. Yeah.
To this one here. So I want to say, Peter, you had heard this one before, right? You're familiar with this one.
Yeah.
Okay, so
this is probably where I jump back in on properly.
Okay, so I'll actually defer to you here to start us off with Saturnian Poetry, and kind of get your thoughts on what the end of this trilogy here is for you.
Well, like I mentioned in part 1, the trilogy. Well, it wasn't supposed to be a trilogy when we released Fathers of the Icy Age. He did say there would be a follow-up, Dialogue with the Stars, and that would be it. So he never mentioned the third part. So I suppose this was an album we never expected back then to ever see or hear. You obviously got the Necrolord artwork, which was different for him.
Yeah,
have such a big name, and that interview that I quoted from earlier, he does talk a wee bit about that apparently initially for Fathers of the Icy Age he did want Necrolord to do that artwork.
Oh.
But he wasn't available at the time. I don't think he had the funds maybe to pay for it. And he felt that obviously the albums that came after that, he didn't think Necrolord would fit in with that kind of style, that aesthetic that he had planned for those albums. And this was the first time where he thought, right, well, Necrolord will be the ideal artist for me. And he said he sat down and when he got talking to Necrolord, they kind of had the same kind of ideas of where they wanted to go with this one. And interestingly, he says that in that interview that he never wants to lose touch with that old 90s black metal feel that he had. So for me, I mean, and for a lot of people, I suppose, this album is close to traditional black metal that you're going to get within Blut Aus Nord or Blut Aus Nord. And what I like about this album is that there's a melody, but there's also a wee bit of folky sort of riffs that come into play in the album, almost like pagan metal elements. And you're getting that from the artwork as well. You have this sort of idea about nature. It's kind of mystical. You know, that album cover art, you know, you got, I don't know if they're called wood nymphs or whatever, nymphs.
Right.
And the people in the artwork in the foreground of it, in the bottom of you see the sort of faces in the artwork. For me, the riffs in this album are just top tier. It's got that great old school sort of atmospheric black metal. Got a human drummer in the form of Thorns from Frost Moon Eclipse, I believe. Which are absolutely superb. I mean, it threw me, you know, obviously the first time hearing that after a while, after going from all the industrial kind of tin stuff beforehand. So yeah, I suppose if we go through the songs, you got the prelude, really good intro, kind of spacey. Wasn't really setting me up for the traditional stuff that was going to follow. Actually, I didn't. You know, you thought that potentially could have taken another tangent, that intro for me. But then you hit with the second song, Pain. I don't know how you pronounce that. You got the choral sort of chants coming in, but he's got that kind of croakish black metal vocals that you mentioned earlier, Geoff. I mean, it's very, again, an uplifting song, very majestic. Talismana comes in, kind of more of the same, but I mean, it's so good. So who's going to complain about it being very similar? Then you have the fourth track, Forest, which, I mean, it's very epic sounding. You just feel that you're in that cover, soaring across that landscape. For me, that song, and obviously you end up creating another side project based on that there. yeah, so it kind of goes on. Similar songs, the metaphor for the moon, or of the moon, sorry. The hymnal vocals superb. Again, I got that sort of soaring feeling that I'm flying over that landscape listening to that song. The last one sort of sees us out with a bit more traditional black metal. But yeah, I think that's probably the closest to traditional black metal. It's kind of like the first part of the trilogy for me. That
You saying
so
the whole this album is like the first part for you,
if you take
or
the
just
three of
that
them
song,
together,
or just that song? You mean the
the
whole
whole
album? Or
album, actually,
okay,
the whole
okay,
album.
that's right. Yep.
If I take the three parts to it, he's Father's the Icy Age, then you got what Dialogue with the Stars, and then you got this one. I think this one and the first one are the closest
I agree
in sound for
completely.
me, in style.
Yep.
So yeah, great album.
All right, Geoff, what do you got?
Yeah, I agree with Peter. It's definitely more in line with Fathers of the Icy Ages, with Dialogue with the Stars, because Dialogue with the Stars has a much more cosmic feel to it. Dialogue with the Stars, to me, feels like the natural, the stepping stone to Cosmosophy is Memoria Vetusta 2. I really think those two, strangely enough, have a lot in common. Mainly the progressive elements of it, and the more, I want to say more melodic. Not that Memoria Vetusta 3 isn't melodic, it's very melodic. Where I think this one succeeds over Father of the Icy Ages, just the time and distance. He's much further along in his recording career. He's a much more established musician. The transitions aren't stilted at times, and you have a much more, the flow is more dynamic. This one, however, I'm going to be blunt with you guys. This was one that, coming into this, I would have pegged this to be a 9 or close to a 9.5 or a 10 for me. As I listened to it, the one thing that popped up, let me pull my notes up, but there was one thing that stood out to me about this album that was, I would honestly call it kind of a negative for me. And that's just for me, by the way. Necrolord artwork, as you said. And by the way, what's interesting about this Necrolord, I don't know a lot of Necrolord stuff, but almost all the Necrolord stuff that I do know is usually blue or purple. And this is not blue or purple, as you can see. So the biggest difference you can hear right off the bat, and Peter mentioned it, is that he's got a real drummer. And man, I love that sound. I mean, I love acoustic drums with, heavy tremolo picked guitars. Much better for me. So again, this is an epic grand black metal album that doesn't quite hit the mark of MV2, but it's fairly close. Starts off with the intro synth and rips into Pain, and that's another thing, by the way, guys. We should point out to any new viewers. You could probably earn some sort of a linguistic degree figuring out how to pronounce all of the titles of most of his tracks. It's fucking insane. Some of this shit is just way out there, man. I don't know if they're even real words. Most probably are, but to me, I'm like, yeah, I'm dumb. I don't know what this is.
You need some knowledge too as well.
Yeah, right. So where are we at here? Hold on. Okay, it's epic and grand. As much as I love this album, the only problem that I started to note with this album is there is some sameness. There's some sameness in the riffs. Four Hiss stood out to me, and that should be noted that that's one of the titles of one of his projects. That's a raging riff fest with tons of snarling, ugly vocals, and it's epic as fuck. The section where it gets quiet then kicks back in heavy is so good. The massive sounding Henosis is raging black riffery and melody and harsh screams with some nice clean vocal passages. Metaphor for the moon. Again, cool raging intro set of chords that ends with a very similar sounding tune to the third song. again, it's a small point, but this album is one that sort of had some samey themes throughout it. So I'm only going to give this one 8. That one dropped a little in my estimation. I mean, I really like the album, and I don't want to say that I didn't, and it would certainly be, I would wager it would be in my top 5 or 6 albums from Blut Aus Nord. But it was one that when I threw on, I was like, remembering what I thought when I listened to it the first couple of times, and it changed a little bit. And the only major detractor was that I just heard some similar. I heard some similar sounding chordal arrangements in 2 or 3 of the songs, and that doesn't mean that you can't. But you guys know, listening to black metal, there's a lot of black metal bands out there that just kind of do the same E minor, D minor, C minor, and they just have that, and it's the special bands, the Emperors, the good Immortal albums, because I don't like all the Immortal albums, the great Enslaved stuff that is inventively taking what, Kellen, do you play an instrument?
I do not.
Okay. Peter, do you play? Okay. So, there's 12 notes. That's it. All those notes have been used throughout time a bazillion times. It's the clever person that figures out how to make those notes sound somewhat different that sets them apart. And Vince Vaughn normally does that. There's a couple tracks on here where he kind of cheats a little bit. That's all. And it's not a knock. It's what stood out to me in the album, given some space from it. But as far as his black metal albums goes, and this one's certainly a black with some folky influence as well, and there's some progressive in there as well. This is probably the one album that I would say, well, it's at the top of the black metal albums heap. It certainly outshines Fathers of the Icy Age for me. And that's a good album. Fathers is a great album, but this one, production, acoustic drums, better recording techniques, better recording engineering techniques, set it above that bar. So I love this album. It probably wouldn't be, if somebody said to me, hey, which Blut Aus Nord black metal album would you recommend? I'd probably shoot for this one over all the other ones.
That's interesting. Like I said, I did look down. It's more, some of the songs are more the same, but being so good, who cares? For me, being a big black metal fan, it's.
Well, yeah, and they're all good too, Peter. Yeah. That's the good point to make. There's not like 4 of the tracks are and 3 are just really, really good. These are all consistently very good, but there's a little bit of sameness on this album, to my ears.
Yeah, me too.
Well, I'll jump in here. So, first off, I'm so happy that we've talked. Like, I know I'll be sending up, photos of more intricate, but this album artwork, holy shit! Like,
crazy good.
When I saw that, I thought this is the Blut Aus Nord record I have been waiting. Like, it's the end of the trilogy. I saw the Necrolord album artwork. Like, this is going to be everything that I've always, whatever, as much as I love Dialogue with the Stars, this is going to take it to the next level.
Before you finish, can I ask you a question though?
Go for it.
I kind of seem to recall you getting this album and like kind of going apeshit over it. I think this is one of your favorites, right? I'm not wrong in that. Yeah. Okay. I remember you getting this, and I think it was when you first came into the enclave of people and you started, I think you learned I was a BAN guy, and you're like, oh my God,
yes,
Saturnian Poetry, it's so fucking amazing. I'm like, dude, it's a killer album. And I backed off it a little bit, but I know that this is one of your, if not your top, it's right up there. I
love this record, but I wanted it to be better than Dialogue with the Stars.
Right.
And for me, it's not.
Okay.
Yep. And
we agree 100% on that.
And it's kind of frustrating because it's everything. Like, if you look down, like, things that could have potentially made Dialogue with Stars better.
Right.
Like, oh, if only they had a live drummer on it.
Yep.
Like,
Yep.
there's things that on paper this should be better. But
Yes.
I liked Peter. You're like, and I think Geoff. There's more here in common with Fathers of the Icy Age. The guitar work on Dialogue with the Stars. And I think Peter, you did a beautiful job sort of highlighting sort of the Buddhist sort of meditation aspect to that record. The first thing I noticed is not just the drumming, but the pacing of this record. It's far more aggressive.
Oh, far more. Yep.
Like, in the sense that that's part of the reason I kind of wished it had taken Dialogue with the Stars and attempted to reach towards something further. To me, this sounds like Vince Vaughn sort of returning, right?
It is. Agree.
And because Peter, you put this, narrative in my mind of, Vince Vaughn understanding himself through his records, and I was like, how do I, like, what is the story arc here? Because you get this record after, like, I feel this is at some point the larger influences that have defined Blut Aus Nord to a degree. And I feel this point even more so now going through the entire chronological order of the records, him kind of reconciling some of the major influences and themes that he's historically had. So we have this.
That's a good point. Because
because I think the next record even drives that point more. We've turned a corner. We have this trilogy that comes to an end where we get sort of like philosophical and theological explanation of what he's always been talking about in his records. We have Fathers of the Icy Age. Even Ultima Thule, I think, is a part of this, and to some extent, a part of like a trilogy that is a more kind of like pagan, traditional, closer proximity to what people understand black metal to be. Yeah. Him sort of reconciling that aspect and how we have this venture to the stars only to return back home. I mean, this is not, to me, that is folk, pagan, black metal personified.
Yeah.
And to get Necrolord to come on and do that album cover, to me, I hear this being so much more familiar to your point, Geoff. This is, I still absolutely love it, but it's almost like he's come back to earth after.
Well, at the risk of throwing this word out there.
Okay.
Is this album ever so slightly derivative of what we think black metal always is? You see my point? In other words, it's still Blut Aus Nord because it's still got his hallmarks, but this album might be the closest I think he's ever come to being a mainstream black metal guy for one small moment. And maybe that's just me. You guys tell me go fuck off.
Well,
but there's a lot of, I hate this word because I don't even know what it means. My kid said there's some black metal tropes in this album I hear.
Okay, I can see, Peter, if you want to jump on this, I'll give you the stage. You can.
Well, Peter's like, fuck you, Geoff.
No. I think going back to the point I made earlier about, and I think we read it out in part 1 in the booklet, this album wasn't supposed to be part of any trilogy.
Right.
Memoria Festusta was going to be 2 parts in his mind. In 1996, anyway, in his mind, there's going to be a second part. Whenever we arrived at that part, will be, and that was 2009. Dialogue with the Stars, and where he, for me, that first part was very aggressive. The second part was otherworldly, sort of very melodic, very celestial, and then it's almost like in the interview I read, he says, "Well, I don't want to forget 90s
where he came from." Yeah.
And then this part emerges, this third part, which you never plan, emerges. So maybe it is him maybe flexing a wee bit. I can do this. and I can show you that I can do it really well, and get Necrolord on board, have the killer artwork, the great sound, live drummer. Let's do this. Let's take a break from this other. I know he always talks about progression, and it's not phases, but let's take a break from all this intense sort of music he's been creating with all these different themes, and it's a break for him to just let loose. Maybe, I don't know. Is that what it's all about? Maybe those tropes find him in. Well, this is how you do black metal to the kids, and then he moves on straight away with the next album into as usual kind of fur. But I don't know.
Yeah, I mean,
That's my
I don't. I think he can't win, right? Like, this is what we've always wanted from him, and he gives it to us, and then I end up sort of being frustrated because it's what I was expecting. You know, it's like, it's interesting, but I think it's fair, and but I also do agree, Peter. There's got to be a part of him that feels like a sense of, you know, at this point, how old is he? So if he's I mean, probably coming up here around 30. He's mid-30s.
Oh, okay. You're saying for this album in 2014.
Yeah. So I mean, if he's around 15 years old and I mean, he was born in 80, right? He's in mid-30s, and
that still blows my mind.
He's gone through so much exploration sonically. Like I know, you know, I'm 37. Like, there are parts of I'm getting to the age where I don't want to lose touch with certain parts of what it felt like to be 15, 16.
Oh God.
And
wait until you're 56, son.
Okay. But to your point, Peter, right? Like, we assume, I think there's a part, like, as an audience who's always watched him sort of pushing the envelope, that he would never sort of return to something that feels this familiar. And it's still a part of him. So I completely agree, Geoff. Like, there's a part of this record that leaves me unsatisfied, wanting more. Right. And what I always feel like is, you know, I'm just going to go listen to Dialogue with the Stars. Like, that was, in terms of what this sound from him offered, like, that's the record that does it for me.
Yeah, but to your point though, if I'm looking through the catalog, there might be, maybe there's two, maybe, well, okay, there's three other ones I would reach over this one. That's not too bad. I'm going to reach for this one over Father of the Icy Age. I'm definitely going to reach for it over Mystical Beast. I'm going to reach for it over Work That Transforms. Everyone talks about that being the real seminal album where he created his sound, and I agree, but I don't love that album. It's probably a 6.5, 7 for me. You see what I mean?
Sure.
Ultima Thule, I like Ultima Thule, but if I only hear it once every year or so, I'm cool with that. This album I can listen to multiple times. It's just that for me, the only detractor was that it was a little too in the pocket, maybe. And that made, and whereas for you wanted to hear all these things, but then once they were given to you, you're like, yeah, but it's not Dialogue with the Stars. And before I went into it, I'm like, man, it's going to have to really be amazing to beat out Dialogue with the Stars. That's how I am.
Sure.
So I wasn't, you were slightly disappointed. I wasn't. I was like, yeah, okay. You see what I mean? That was the dichotomy between us. And Peter being the black metal dude that he is, he's like, fuck you guys. I want Ultima Thule and Fathers of the ICH.
Well, I will say this, after listening to what you just said, after listening to all these albums, I want Mort. I want to be in that dark, weird place again.
You do, like, or you don't? You do or you don't?
I do. I do, and I don't, I suppose. It's like, you know, you look at an oven and the ring's on and it's hot. Yep. And it's like, I want to touch that, but I know if I touch that, it's going to be bad.
It's going to hurt. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. But I want more.
You know, it's really,
I want that twisted world.
Peter, it's really interesting you bring that up, because Mort was one of the albums I listened to 4 or 5 years ago and was like, the fuck is this, man? When I listened to it again this last time, I was like, Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And that's going to segue into an upcoming album that I thought I fucking hated. And I listened to it today twice and I was like, what was I thinking? I think you know which one I'm talking about. We're not there yet.
So in 2014 we have Saturnian Poetry.
Right.
And then there's the first one that you wanted to talk about, Geoff, before we move on to
Triunity. Triunity
Yeah.
came out in 14 too.
So I know you've listened to that one, right?
Yep.
What are
I'll mention it. Do you want me to go now? Are we going now? Okay.
Let's just jump into it.
Okay, so as we discussed, Memoria Vetusta 3 comes out in 2014. Do you have a date on that, Kellen, when it came out?
Sure. Here, I'll just do it quick for you.
I'm thinking was it October, September, maybe? Or am I way off?
No, you got it. October.
October, that's what I thought. So I believe before that, I'm gonna guess April or May, I believe they Vinzval put out a split, a full, half an album size, a full LP. 3 songs from each artist being Blut Aus Nord, Blut Aus Nord, however you want to say it, and also a French industrial doom, blackened doom. That's what I've read on this guy's, the bio for this band, quote unquote, this one man project called Phobos, and it's Phobos P period H period O period, etc. etc. I had never heard of this Phobos before, and I'm not the biggest Split guy. I just generally don't bother with them. And that's probably not smart, but it's just how it is. And I kind of figured when I was collating the collection, they'd just be the last things I picked up along the way. So I did finally listen to that today, and I was very surprised by the Blut Aus Nord songs. What I'm hearing on those 3 Blut Aus Nord songs are either leftovers or alternate tracks from the 777 trilogy. They are, I'm going to dip into my note real quick because I did wrote some notes about those songs. And what I have here is Delibrio is kind of mixing black and death and prog, and oddly, some almost classical elements with whispered vocals and some sick as hell guitars on this song. The drums, I could not tell if they were real or not, so maybe that's just my ears kind of getting baked by so much Blut Aus Nord, I couldn't tell, but that song is fucking badass. I thought, man, this is real good. I'm going to check out track 2. I figured if it was really shitty on the first track, I'd just bolt past it. Second track, Hubris. Very cool song. I've never heard this before. Giving this a listen, it might be my favorite track. And frankly, it probably rivals some of the better tracks on the 777 trilogy. It's just the synths, the guitars are just amazing on this track, Hubris. So I'm going to suggest you guys both go at least check out those 3 songs. Very reminiscent of Cosmosophy material, so obviously I like it a lot. The last song, no idea how to pronounce it, Nemian, something like that. Crazy angular guitars open into an anguished strangled vocal. These songs have to have been leftovers from the 7/7 trilogy. They just have those 3 albums vibes to my ears. This could easily have been a Desanctification track or the Nemian track. Good weird leads on this one. These are some killer BAN tracks I never bothered with because I'm not a big Split guy, but I'd probably pick this up now if I found it used easily. Phobos tracks, One Man Black and Industrial Doom reminds me of a little bit of Skinny Puppy and Ogre. Only more downbeat and eerie in a cosmic sort of way. It's not nearly as dancey as Skinny Puppy or Frontline or that kind of industrial. I could see I might enjoy this if I was tripping or stoned. I've never tripped, so there you go. I don't really know, but I have gotten stoned, and I probably would tend to get into this more if I was a little bit, baked. Material isn't bad, but it gets a bit monotonous. They all kind of sound the same. Don't hate it, but they really aren't very comparable, or excuse me, compatible with the BAN tracks. It's an odd pairing. I give the BAN 8.5 out of 10. The other stuff I'd probably give a 4 or 5. And I like a lot of industrial. It's just this stuff was very generic and repetitive. So now we jump ahead to and you guys didn't, so that people know out there, you guys did not listen to these two splits, right?
No.
Okay.
The
Codex, I'm sorry. You had the Codex Obscura. That's right. Okay.
Yeah.
I'll give my thoughts on that quick. 2016, this came out. It's a split with some artists from Texas, I believe the guy's from, called Evangelist. There are 4 BAN tracks, 1 Evangelist track that is nearly, I think it's over 20 minutes. Evanescent Hallucination, the first song sounds vaguely familiar to a similar melody off of other BAN. I couldn't figure it out, but a lot of trip hop beats and guttural whispered vocals. Dark Foreboding could almost be a 9 Inch Nails song, very much one of the more industrial sounding BAN tracks. Resonance, heavy bass, grindy intro, almost halftime, feels like it's going to collapse in on itself as the drums flounder and purposefully to find a groove. This is sinister shit in the vein of Deus Salutis, which we're going to talk about next. Probably written around the same time, I'm guessing. Parallel Echoes is a mushroom trip of a halting, lurching beast driven mainly by synth lines and some weirdly alien sounding strings that sound like they are dying as they are being played. Vin's vocals are crusty and evil as fuck. Infra voice, that was the one, fourth song, Infra voice ensemble, actually danceable and groovy. It's a pretty seriously cool track. The Evangelist song is fucking bizarre. It's death metal vocals, cool, sinister guitars, which at times are very melodic, but the production's a little weird and gauzy and muffled. There's a lot of dissonance and strange spoken word sections during the mellower psych sections throughout, plus some really nutty electronic beat sections in the very beginning that fly in and out of nowhere. It's kind of a mishmash of crazy styles that I'm just not sure work together. Truly a very weird song, but very creative if you like bizarre. Can't say I hated it, but can't say I liked it either. It was so bizarre I just couldn't completely wrap my head around it. And I have this CD and rarely feel compelled to listen to it, but oddly, because I had to listen to do this tonight, this guy digs a lot of different kinds of music and he can't seem to decide what he's best at making. But it got my attention for the whole 20. I focused on it way more than I thought I would. So I say this is non-essential for non-completists, probably a 6.5 out of 10, mostly for the BAN stuff. And again, Triunity, which is the other one the other split, I'd say that's more for completists. I don't necessarily think that, if you downloaded those tracks somewhere and burned them, that's probably good enough. But if you really are somebody that has to own everything that Vince Voll's done, then you're probably going to want to get it. But I'd probably do it used for both those now. So that's what I got on those two.
Okay, so
you want to pose any thought? Do you want to throw any thoughts on that one, or
no?
Not really?
I mean, I they're a band. I talked about the impact that one of their records had back in 2012. But I can understand. I think at this point in time, Evangelist was signed to Demember Morty, and that is
they threw them together.
Why they paired them together for a split. Nonetheless,
okay.
We move from Saturnian Poetry in 2014 here. Next full length we run into is Deus Salutis Meae.
That's as good as I could get it.
All right. All right. So this record, I'd be interested. So I kind of made a point last time about Vince Voll to some degree reconciling part of the major influences that he'd had over the past, I guess, 2 decades at this point?
Almost,
so
pretty much, yeah.
A little over that. So I just kind of get your thoughts here. I'll let Geoff, if you want to jump in and talk about your impression of this record.
Okay, I bought this record and I have the album. I have the silver quote unquote limited edition with the A2 poster in it. And I got it at Vinyl Altar in Philadelphia. If you're in Philly, go to that store. If you're even near Philly, go to that store. It's fucking killer, and it's one of Dreadful Rick's favorite places to shop at. And I believe the guy's name is Chris. Real cool dude that owns it. It was the only Blut Aus Nord he had, and I'm like, yeah, I never heard of this one. And I looked it up on Rate Your Music, and the ratings were... So I got it. I listened to it once. I struggled with it. Now, keep in mind, this is 27. It came out in 17, right?
Right.
Yeah, I got it in summer of 2017. I want to say I got it maybe the fall of 2017. And I put it aside and never really went back to it. And I put it on today. And Jesus fucking Christ. It blew my mind. It literally, I know there was like pus and stuff coming out of my eye sockets listening to this. Literally, I think I was bleeding from my pores. This is by far, in my opinion, the darkest, most evil shit this guy's ever come up with. This is fucking psychotically dark. This is cinematically gnarly as fuck. This, to me, is the logical successor, and I think this is where you were trying to go. So I'll say it, but I think you were setting me up for this. To me, this is the logical successor to Morton. It is twisted. It's... hang on. I got some quick notes.
Okay.
Quick notes. This one... what's weird is right at this album, I started to try to get a little more concise in my stuff because I was saying the same things over and over, kind of. And by the way, we should mention that Deus Salutis Meae means God of my salvation. These are the descriptors I came up with off the top of my head: disturbing, ominous, crushing, hostile, dystopian. The opening track is one of the most unholy and unsettling tracks he's ever done. It's pure fucking savage and evil and scary heavy. And the crushingly oppressive industrial shit that Finsvold does is back with plenty of sound effects, anguished voices, screaming, howling insanely in the background, which then moves into Impious, which ups the ante from the first track as far as the insanity goes. The background of this track, Impious, there's just shit happening that it sounds like people are being skinned alive. It's horrific, and I recall that I didn't dig this much when I got it, but something changed because this is savagery beyond the pale. I'm digging this big time already, way more than I should be. To me, this is BAN's Street Cleaner or Pitch Shifters Desensitized. I'm sorry, this is BAN's Godflesh equivalent of Street Cleaner or Pitch Shifters Desensitized. That song in particular. This leads into an ambient interlude called Gnosis, into Apostasis, and the insanity just goes interstellar at this point. This song is so horrid, it's beautiful, and I literally found myself... I'm not kidding when I say this, guys. I literally found myself asking myself why I like twisted shit like this so much. I wish I was kidding about that. I'm not. That thought kept going through my head. Why do you find this appealing? I don't know. Maybe I'm really fucked up. I don't know. Probably the most vocal dominant song on the album and crushing bass tones supported by synths. This song is just cancer to your soul, no joke, and I love it. Abysme is next. Can this get worse? I fear, yes, it will. a slight dark interlude, which is abysmal. Then on to Revelatio, which warps into frenetic, and it's warped, pissed off with some absolutely wretched. I don't know why I have this word here. Santeros must be guitar solos from Vins, accented by twisting bass lines, warped strings in the background as guitar lines twist into detoned hell. Another interlude into Ex Tenebrae Lucius, which is probably the most experimental black metal piece on the album, but it's not really black metal. It's more of a amalgam of shards of psychedelic vignettes of what death must sound like. It's fucking horrible, and I mean that it's terrible, but incredible at the same time. This was Vin's final huge blending of industrial and otherworldly cosmic insanity. This guy's musical imagination is on some other plane or dimension, because I really can't see how he can come up with this stuff. This stuff makes Mayhem sound like the Bee Gees in comparison. This shit is coming from a warped as fuck but genius musical mind. Last track, Metanoia, closes this out and is similar in tone and fashion to all the other songs. And again, it's just over the top with its horror soundscapes and fear-inducing insanity. However, I think possibly he should have put that in the middle of the album and used Ex Tenebrae Lucius at the end instead. Jesus, I'm exhausted after 33 minutes of listening to this, no joke. I know why this album is only 33 minutes, because if it was longer, you'd literally go clinically insane if it were a standard CD length. Seriously, your mind couldn't take much more than he gives you here, thankfully, although I kind of wish he did. This is a 9.5 out of 10, so fucking insanely and horribly good. That was like my big, I'm going to write up a badass review. Again, this is Mort Part 2, and it's, in my opinion, I could be wrong, you guys may disagree, I think it's way more twisted than Mort, and Mort is very twisted and very good.
Okay, so the gauntlet has been thrown down, Peter.
I have laid it down, Peter. Bring it.
Do you know something? I don't own this one. Okay. And similar to Sect and Desanctification, I haven't listened to this much, so it was a bit of an ordeal this week listening to this one. I'm glad you give the English translation of the title, God of My Salvation, because I was trying to work out, looking at the artwork, is this religious? Is this spiritual? What is the thing? What am I looking at here? Because obviously the artwork's almost like a mirror image of itself, but it's different.
Oh, right.
So,
cool artwork.
So yeah, cool apparently this is a solo album by Finn's Fall. I read about that.
Yeah, solo.
And it's a standalone album, so it's not connected to any other previous work or any future work. It's dark. I actually wrote down here, and you mentioned this band previously, not too long ago, Geoff. I wrote, this is probably the closest to what I know of Portal.
Yeah, that's not a bad. There's an analogy that works there. Yes.
Yeah. I'm glad you mentioned all those other songs, because for me, going back and listening to this a few times during the week, I tend to like the second half of the album better than the first half. Apostasis. I mean, I've got that 2 words. Disorientating riffs. I move on to Revelatio. It's got that blistering start. It's heavy in the dissonance. It's got this great lead guitar halfway through the song, but it starts to sound out of tune. if he
Yep.
intentionally meant that.
I think it was intentional.
Yeah. Ex tenebrae lucius, which I looked up the meaning from darkness to light, and I was thinking, is this guy having a laugh at me here? Because
He saw your first part, even though it hasn't been published yet.
yeah,
He saw your thesis on all of his previous albums.
yeah. 'Cause for me, this song was just a nightmare, absolute
It is.
nightmare. And I don't, I seem to tend to throw in these obscure references, but at one point, did I hear Ecto One?
You cut out there. You hear what?
At one point, did I hear Ecto One? Do you know the car from Ghostbusters? And it's
Oh,
in the guitar solo. I think
possibly.
I hear Ecto One.
You might possibly have. That would be
I mean,
fucking hilarious if he put that in there. He could have, because there's a hell of a lot. There's a hell of a lot of backing, voices, and who knows what tapes he's using.
yeah. And you're not, wah, from Ecto One. Wah.
Although he would probably have to get clearance from the movie company, and that would cost a lot, I would think.
Oh man.
So he
That
may
might
have
be-
just created some sound on the guitar that sounded like it, but
Yeah, he said the
Unique
wah pedal.
observation on this record. That might be the most unique thing I've.
Yeah. I don't know if this has anything to do with the fact that my daughter's been making me play Rocket League with her recently, and my car league is Ecto One. So
that's what it is. You got it ingrained in your head, man.
But
So
yeah,
let me
I agree with you about the final track, Metanoia.
Metanoia.
Mixing that, for me, I got down mixing that dissonant part where they reach for the heavens guitar. So
Yeah.
But yeah, I think an initial listen to this album, I wasn't too keen on it. But again, I go back to that other point I made about one of the albums earlier. You need to have patience, and you need to trust in Vince. Well, he knows what he's doing. He knows the way. You listen to it again, and you listen to it again, and it starts to make sense. And you see the nuances that he has in the sound and the different layers, and it reveals itself with time. And then I actually grew to like this album quite a bit.
I was going to say, if you're digging Mort right now, I have a hard time understanding how you couldn't dig this one, because I heard very similar things. Only to me, this is Mort on psychedelics, going literally looking to sever your head from your body and place it somewhere where you can't find it.
Exactly.
And I know
more than first listen was like, this is hell.
It's a nightmare, but this is further. This would be, we all know Leviathan, right? What is it? The 10 sub-levels of hell? I'm pretty fucking sure this is right next door. This is like Leviathan's neighbor somewhere down there, because this is some evil goddamn shit, man. I mean, I want to hear what Kellen has to say on this one, because I just have this feeling, but maybe I'm wrong.
Well, okay, so this is the part that I will differ from you, Geoff.
Mm-hmm.
This does not feel as ambient as Mort does to me.
Oh, I agree with that. I agree. Yes. Yep.
But I will stand with this. Like, this record does not, I don't know what it is, but it did not receive the kind of praise and recognition. I fucking love this record.
It's so disgusting.
And I'll also say, like, it's the first time we get, like, I think on at this point in his career, we get a record that is this intensely oppressive, industrial, like that had happened. The most pioneering and I think seminal works had come earlier in his career. And since he's moved now to Deborah Morty, we have not had this kind of intensity.
Not at all.
And what I first felt when I heard this record was I don't know what they did in terms of the production quality here, but I always felt like I was being like assaulted on the work which transforms God, or to some degree Mort or Mythical Beast. Like the attack was coming at me. for this record, I feel like I'm trapped inside of the machine.
Yep, exactly.
Like in the sense that there's a part of me is it intense as and punishing as this record is, like that instinct that we all have to kind of put our hand on the stove to still see it hurts.
Right.
I wonder what it would be like to listen to this record with a tremendous sort of stereo system.
Oh my God. Could you imagine a fucking 7.1 stereo system
Right.
where it's just, you know, with
Like-
a 200 amp, you know,
Watt amp, yeah.
yeah, watt amp. Oh my God.
Just because when I remember listening to this in my car, which is not a tremendous
Right.
you know, room for fidelity.
Right.
And
Sure.
I kept on thinking like those little tiny speakers you have on the doors, whatever that line your car, like it felt like parts of the instruments were bouncing off different parts of the car.
Wow.
And I was like, holy shit, like I'm just streaming this from my phone into my car. But the sort of immersiveness of the drums and all
Great
the
way to put it.
in like industrial textural components, like when Peter was saying you have to trust him, you know, he knows what he's doing here. I think he gave us a record from this with these kind of traits that the other records never had the opportunity to sort of reach for. Just the experience on the production side of things here is otherworldly. And I feel the same way, Geoff. The record finishes at 33 minutes. I was like, oh my God, there's not more. Like I
did that. I was like, are you kidding me? That's all. I
Like
wanted
the-
to re-listen. I wanted to re-listen to it, but I was like, I still got to get through a couple. I had to get through Hallucinogen, and I had to get through the last one. I was like, yeah, I don't have time. Let me ask you if this is an accurate descriptor, I guess. This is a sensory assault, this album.
sure.
It comes at you from every angle, and you're not sure where to fend off the damage from. It feels like it's coming. This fucking album sounds like it's coming to hurt you. There's something about it that just feels like it's a personal thing, and it wants to fucking consume you.
Right.
That's why I used all those weird words like cancer and eating your soul and stuff, because it feels like it's that fucking evil. I mean, to me, I've listened to pretty much everything this dude's done. I don't think anything else compares to the evilness of this album. And it's not an evil like Satan evil. It's not a monster evil. It's up here. It's a subconscious evil that you're like, why do I feel like I could feel that weird, creepy skin feeling, like my nervous system going, oh, and that's doesn't happen to me much because I love horror movies and I'm not a jump scare dude, but this thing's fucking, man.
Right.
This could end up my favorite album by him at some point. That's bizarre.
I mean, the work with Transforms God is really important to me on a personal level, and I think that's
Sure.
I love that record. Dialogue with the Stars, I love that record. This one I feel just so passionately about because I feel to some degree gets dismissed.
It was, yeah.
People don't talk about this, and it was another point I will make here because it has been. I don't even think Odinist did this to the same extent, right? Like I don't feel Odinist is as scathing as this.
Oh
So-
God, no.
Let's say Mort is the last moment that we've had. It's been 11 years
Yeah,
since this has really been fully explored. And I
Right.
feel the same way the benefit happened when we had 13 years that separated Icy Age and Dialogue. Like
right.
when he has the opportunity to let these ideas sort of like build, when the floodgates open, like I think we get a great record.
Yeah.
And
But I do feel strongly that, like we said, man, it's only 33 minutes. I don't know that you could take a whole lot more. 40 minutes of this might be where I'd have to be like, okay, I gotta disengage a little from this because it was. I'm telling you, this album was getting in here, and I have enough issues there. I didn't need any more, so it was like, and here's the thing: I went into that album today. I listened to it today earlier about noon. I went into it fully expecting not to really like it because I remembered I didn't particularly care for it. Don't know where I was at that point. Don't know what was going on. There may have been who knows? That was 6 years ago, 7 years ago, whatever. Wait, when did it come out? 17.
17.
So 5 years ago. And I can't answer why I thought it was I don't think that anymore. I just don't think
Yeah.
that anymore. And I would say, Peter, let it stew and marinate every couple of weeks or so and go back to it, because I'd be shocked if you like Mort that much. I'd be shocked that you don't like this. And like you said, Kellen, Mort is definitely a lot more dark ambient, i.e., it's a little more spectral and serene at times. This one you don't really get much of that at all. It's a full on a frontal assault. Or
Sure,
Well,
sure.
Before listening to this, I did avoid reading anything about it, so I didn't realize till afterwards how poorly, well, not poorly received, but it's not held in as high esteem as other works of Vince Val. Yeah, I think it's one I need to return to a bit more to really understand it. I want to see if I can hear Ecto One again, to be honest.
you're gonna have to find that spot for Kellen so you can throw it in there during your. I don't recall it exactly because my brain doesn't retain that kind of stuff unless it's so obvious, but I believe you. There's so much going on. There's so much swirling in the background that's not the guitars, that's not the bass synths, that's not the drums and the vocals. There's this tapestry of evil that's back there. You can hear it in almost every song has some. There's the one song I think it's the second one, or maybe it's the Tenebrae one, where you literally hear people going, ah, you just hear that in the background. It's not overt, like, ah, it's more like, ah, and you hear it very creeping through the lattice work of the mix. And you're like, well, that's really unsettling. It's like, that this album would be the perfect soundtrack to some sort of a snuff film or some sort of a psychological thriller, a slasher of some sort that doesn't show a lot of blood but shows a lot of horror that is more up here than just slitting somebody's throat. But this is, what shocks me is, and maybe he has done and we don't know about it, but I think we would, but it shocks me he hasn't done more soundtrack work by now, or that somebody hasn't gone, hey, this guy, man, we got to get him. Because, I think Kellen, Peter, you guys are familiar with Lustmore?
Mhm.
Brian Lustmore, Dark Ambient dude. He's done a lot of soundtrack work, man. And the album Heresy by Lustmore is probably one of the most scary albums you'll ever hear. And this album is on par with that, only it's probably a little more scary overall.
I
So
wonder if he has been asked and he's just
I
like,
wonder too.
no, thanks.
Maybe that's what it is, because he doesn't want to work to somebody else's thoughts or standards, or hey man, I want you to write something, and maybe that's what it is. But he'd be perfect for it, for Christ's sake. I mean, this shit is ugh. I want more of this one, to be honest with you.
Yeah, I mean, it's probably a sign of a great record, right? Is that it finishes and you would like more of it.
I just hope he does something like it again down the road.
So, okay, that's a great point. And this is before we transition into Hallucinogen. And I know that the side projects here, I don't know if that's a fair term, additional projects that Vinfald has taken on now start to occupy the way that his career has sort of siloed between different styles. So, for example, the Jerusalem project,
which I have not listened to, I have to admit.
Right. So I think,
but I know about it.
Right now, I think that is starting to occupy more of the industrial influences.
Yes.
I would say the record I think that you had earlier, Peter, the Forhist, that is an atmospheric black metal project. So I know
allegedly, Killen, allegedly this project called The Meditant
Right.
is, I've read in some of the stuff that of people that are really locked into this shit, I've read that may be taking up the Memoria Vetusta mantle to its next iteration, if there is a fourth one or a fifth one or a sixth one.
Sure. Because the reason I wanted to bring that up, because we don't need to go into those
Yeah, it's
projects,
good you did.
because I do think when we get here to Hallucinogen, I want to contextualize the records as Vince Vaughn trying to make a departure and introducing sort of new themes, new concepts for Blut Aus Nord as a project.
Which he definitely does on this next album, I think.
Right.
So that's a good segue into it. That it's almost like he's sectionalizing his output, as far as, or maybe sectionalizing is not the word, but you know, he's got cattle shoots that, hey, well, that's for this project, that's for this project, that's for that project. Now, Jerusalem is allegedly him and that W.D. Feld guy. I believe BAN is all three, and maybe what's his name again? The drummer.
Thorns?
What is it?
W.D. Feld or Thorns?
No, the Thorns, the acoustic drummer, and then what was the Forest is going to be more the black metal. I didn't see. Was there anybody else involved in that, Peter? Allegedly.
Ghost, was it?
Ghost. Okay.
Or Ghost?
Yeah.
So yeah, Kellen, that's a good way to put it. That he's starting to write. I mean, first of all, something that really does get me is this guy is just prolific almost beyond understanding. It's like, you know, some bands take 6 years to write a fucking album, Metallica, or, you know, I mean, just you name it. There's a lot of those bands out there. This guy is cranking out 2, 3, 4, 5 albums in 2 years. It's like for all these different various projects, and yet all of them seem to be high quality. That's pretty unusual.
Sure. So do we want to jump in here to Hallucinogen?
Yeah, I didn't want to take away from what you were saying. Did you want to add anything more to that? I'm
Sure.
just saying.
But I mean, to your point, like his records, he's prolific, but I think they're so different.
Yes.
And they make transitions. I just feel like as his music continues to come out, he is not sort of repeating a certain sort of identity. But I think one of the things that we consistently try and go back to is for him, there's some interconnected aspect to them.
That's true. I mean, and that would be a fascinating interview to talk to him about that. He's never going to do it because he doesn't want to explain it all. But I think the other point to make too is that not only are they all relatively, these different projects different, even though there is a similar thread or a commonality. The other thing to point out is that generally speaking, they're all really good quality albums. They're not just, this one's pretty good. That one sucks. That one's shit. You know, how many bands' discographies can you go through where they put out 19 albums and you generally really can't find a bad album, and you really can't find many that are mediocre either. That's not too common.
Yeah. So
we're almost there.
We're almost, closing down on the end. Last 2 records here. Peter, did you get a chance to listen to this one? Are you pretty familiar with it?
Yeah, I have this one.
Okay, so I'll head to you first here and get your thoughts on this one.
Yeah, so that first track on this album was Nomos Nebula. So my impression of this album is that the dissonance is now replaced by sort of warmer tremolo riffing. It's very Cascadian, sort of black metal. It's moving to the second track. Is it Nebuliste? It's very different for his previous work. And I put down a sort of a note here. Has Vince Vaughn taken some happy drug? because there's some psychedelic that starts to sort of creep into the sound. And even on the third track, I mean, I'm trying to pronounce these probably Sibelius. I have a note down here that this is very similar to, for me, modern atmospheric black metal. So if I ever want to go on something like, you know, on YouTube to the Black Metal Promotions channel, and he posts stuff every day, and he puts down the tag atmospheric black metal, and after a while it's just like they all sound like each other. I think Fensval, what, 3 years ago now, has perfected that template. And listening to all these bands coming afterwards, they're just copying that song. And it's executed to such a high standard. For me, I felt this is probably the most accessible Blut Aus Nord album. And it's, I put down here, it's complete opposite to Mort. So if Mort took us to dark places, then this is taking us to some very light, clear, happier places, definitely. You move into the fourth track, Thosmos. Again, sorry about pronunciation. You know, it's got raging black metal. It's got these monkey sort of hymnal vocals. Gives the song this kind of added depth. As do the melodic sort of lead guitar parts that come in about halfway through. Again, the next track then, Mahagma. Again, is this the template to this modern atmospheric black metal sound that we get today? Next song, I'm not even going to bother trying to attempt pronouncing that. Again, it's very sort of dreamlike, and it kind of feeds into the sort of overall atmosphere of this album. These hallucinogenic sort of, I don't know if he's on a happy trip or not. And it is a different kind of album that I respect from Blut Aus Nord. Where he's taking us to this place where I never sort of expected to go with him, which is kind of blissful, happy, kind of carefree. Yeah, he's on some kind of good drugs. I don't know. That's kind of my thoughts on this album. I really, the musicianship, as usual, is top notch. The production is excellent, but it's a different type of album. Kind of like I mentioned about the previous one. It was, again, he said a solo album, and it wasn't really connected to any kind of themes. I felt with this one, again, it's like, I know the next album is probably going to be connected to this one in some way, because I have notes down regarding that. But at the time when this came out, it was like, this is different. This is new. I don't know what was going on in his life at that point. I don't know how I can connect this to my kind of overarching storyline I had for the first part. Right. But what I do know is that I do like music-wise, it's a superb album.
I mean, I don't know if you want to jump in here, Geoff, and get your thoughts on Hallucinogen. I'm interested to kind of get what you think.
Yeah, my phone was dying, so I charged it enough so I can get through the end of it. That's why you were hearing that fan in the background. Sorry. It's 9 gazillion. It's like I think I'm probably trapped in that Deus Salutis Meae cover somewhere in my bedroom here. But okay, so Hallucination. This one came at a very weird time for me, and you can leave this in, Kellen. I mean, it's up to you, but I think it's kind of apropos. I believe this came out in September-ish, 19.
Yep, you got it.
Okay. which happened to coincide literally within a few weeks of me essentially being cold turkeyed off of a drug I'd been on for anxiety for literally 7 years. And my doctor didn't understand the concept of tapering off. And yeah, it was fucking brutal. I'm shocked I'm here some days. And I remember this coming out, and I was stoked because obviously that artwork is absolutely fucking amazing. Those Morel mushrooms and hallucinogen, and you're going, oh my God, this is going to be so trippy. And I could really not listen to it for the first year it was out. It was too intense for me. I wasn't listening to any music back then, to be honest with you. I went probably 9 months without even. I bought the Opeth. The Opeth album came out right around the new Opeth, or the last Opeth was September of 1992, and I could not fucking. I didn't listen to it for a whole year before. I had no idea what it sounded like. The reason I say that is that when I did dive into it sometime in 20, late 20, probably summer of 20 or late fall of 20, I was absolutely blown away. I was like, oh, come on, man. Don't tell me there's going to be an album better than Cosmosophy. That's just not possible. No, man. No. Don't do it to me, Vinzval. Don't do it. It's not better. It's right there. I mean, it is, depending on the day, it's right there. This album is absolutely stunning. And it's a new era, but there's still old BAN in there. It's just there's a new trajectory, so to speak, okay? And I'll hit my notes quick, and I don't say anything horrifying on this one, as far as I recall.
Kind of hard to.
All right, so here we go. The next one, all bets are off on though. Nomos Nebularum opens massively with epic chords and trilled melody lines, amazing synthesizers and background chorals. This is really epic, cosmic shit. Cosmic being the key word. This newer sound direction has a much more epic and grandiose and cosmic sound to an already epic progressive sound. But the massive sound of this album is a new direction and far more proggy, dare I say. Nebel Nest is almost a standard hard rock prog song for BAN, really angular but super catchy. Sibyllis has a really cool melody line that's super catchy, and the chanting and choral choir work sounds amazing. Love this track. Some nice chugs on that one too, on the guitar melodies. They're super infectious. Anthosmos starts out very mellow with shimmering guitar lines, then blasts into probably the most black metal of tremolo pick chords that evolve into a huge sounding synth guitar climax into a serene ambient volume swelled arpeggios. Mahagma has a lot of vocal choirs and some unique chord progressions and what sounds like Gregorian monk chants that aren't overdone and work well in the song. Thunderous drums, massive sounding chords, melodious sections. This song kicks ass, might be my favorite overall track. Hallucinalia. I don't know. Is that how it's
That works for me.
Hallucinalia is kind of the real moody, proggy track on the album. Another very good track with some psychedelic solos throughout. Very melodic. Cosmosophy, the last track, is a beast as well, especially the part where it gets soft and ambient, and then kicks in with the heavy riffing chords, and the tremolo pick melodies are great at the end. This is a solid 9.5, easy and very close to a 10. Only negative is that there wasn't a specific high point for me overall. It all kind of was so good. It's sort of you ride the wave of being close to exceptional with this album the whole way through. Everything's just amazing, and I will draw one parallel. Whereas in Memoria Vetusta 3, where I felt like some of the tracks were samey, this album has sameness to it, but somehow it all sounds fresh. I don't know how to put that into better words. It's just that the ebb and flow of the album, the wave that it rides is just one continuous peak in a way. It's like you're always kind of your trajectory is always up. And again, I use cosmic, we always try to find these words to pretty things up, but let's talk about someone like, Blood Incantation, cosmic death metal. Well, this is cosmic black metal. That's the only thing or cosmic prog black metal. This, without question, though, is the most proggy album that he's done. The orchestrations with the synthesizers in the background they're just amazing. And kind of like Deus Meae and whatever, Saludos, this album kind of, it's all around you. You feel it all around you. It's like you're absorbing it through the pores in your skin. So, killer album. It's like I've said, Cosmosophy would be the one I would usually start someone. This would be 1 or 1A. This would be the second one probably. And I do know quite a few people that are in our community didn't really know about this band. For example, Ben knew of the band, but he didn't really own anything, and he got, I'm pretty sure on this, he got Hallucinogen, and I think it kind of sent him on his way. Now, I don't know where he's gone with this collection overall, but I do recall him writing about this or speaking about it in one of his videos 2-3 years ago and saying, man, I didn't really realize this shit's so incredible. And that's what it is. This is an incredible album. Just one little note, and then I'll shut up. Kellen, you were drawing the
yes, my graph of that.
No, you were drawing the point, or you were making the point that all those other side projects, now we can take Blut Aus Nord in a new direction, and that's exactly what happened with this album. The weird thing is it doesn't stay on that direction, in my opinion. So that's all I'll say until we get to the final album.
Yes, very true. I still kind of have mixed feelings about this record. So first impression, or something that I would immediately say about it is the easiest entrance into their catalog.
Yes, agreed.
And I don't know how to feel about that. Like, in the sense that I don't know if I wanted this from Blut Aus Nord. And then the other side of it is like, this is also feels like someone like, how should I say this? They just showed up to the party, or they just showed up to the class, and they schooled everyone else in their own like discipline. Right? Like
that's a good way to put it. Yeah.
Like, there are so many atmospheric kind of black metal bands that are floating out there, and here's someone who takes their first real crack at it and puts out potentially the defining genre, record in the subgenre for the year.
Yeah, but remember one thing. He's literally has 25 years of back experience doing a lot of other stuff. So he was building to this, and maybe he was purposely staying away from it.
Right.
Let me put it this way. Let me put it this way to you. It was interesting the way you preface that, because what you really want to say is, I fucking love this album, but I don't want to, because it might make him popular. This isn't
Well,
this isn't 5150, dude.
I think
I mean,
I think you've probably summed it up better than I did, but where I made reference to, you know, that YouTube channel, which
Right.
turning that type of music out every day. And like you say, he just walked up and just, yeah, I can release that album if I want. And I mentioned this word earlier, but as my 12-year-old daughter would always say, he's just flexing.
ah,
He's flexing and he's walked away.
he's flexing.
But,
It could be he's flexing. I don't know. But seeing as how he doesn't really want to do real interviews and have anybody really see who he is, he's not flexing too much, you know.
well, no, he doesn't need to, because he just released that album. He went, you
But
want atmospheric black metal? Here you go.
there you go.
But
But is it, let me ask you this though. Is it, and you would know this better, way better than me, both you guys. You know, Jake is, you know, your spirit animal on atmospheric black metal, right? And Jake probably knows, literally, I think that dude knows more about atmospheric black metal. Is this really atmospheric black metal in the context of what I think of atmospheric black metal is more the what's that band, In the Woods? Is that what they're called?
Go in the woods. Oh, in the woods, avant-garde black. Well, is it even black metal after a while?
Well, it's like,
Heart of
I
the
think
Ages, maybe.
when I think of atmospheric black metal, I think of, you know, posty type stuff.
I was going to say Forgotten Woods, but
No, there's a Canadian band, something in the woods, in the trees.
But in the woods were a Norwegian band. They're still going now, but
Okay.
it was. Do you remember? What do you call them? Green Carnation. When they started
Yeah,
releasing
yeah.
in the early
Yeah.
'90s, they were
Yes.
avant-garde black metal, and then they became more or less morphed into In the Woods. And then
Okay.
Green Carnation came back later on, but completely different animals. So
Well, I guess what I'm asking
right.
is that, you know, am I looking at this wrong? What atmospheric is? Because what I hear with hallucination is just this unbelievably cosmic atmospheric metal. It's just sort of out there hovering above everything else. And maybe I'm wrong. I don't know.
So I'll take a crack at this first, and then if you want to jump on, Peter, and get your reply. I see what you're saying, that like this is a bit more unique relative to the vast majority of the bands that play in this style.
Yes, I agree. Yep.
Like there is still some of the best parts that you previously mentioned of Cosmosophy and so on and so forth that are sort of trickling in here. Like I get that.
Yep. There's little bits.
still-
There's little bits of Memoria Vetusta in there. There's little bit, because there's no all out raging black metal, but there's a song or two that has the black metal
Sure.
chordal progressions and the sort of the what you kind of expect. I just think that, again, you probably hit it. He's the guy that walked into the school and said, "All right, guys, let me show you motherfuckers how it's done."
Right.
See ya.
I just, because I mean, that's not like typical black metal, you know.
No,
you know what I
not at
mean?
all.
So I just, it's for me, I don't know if it's my familiarity with the subgenre or if or what is essentially makes it so, or the sort of the warmer, sort of more ethereal. It's not as like challenging, which is something that I enjoy about Blut Aus Nord, is this aspect of like, usually I cannot, to your point, Geoff, you've made this earlier in the stream, is like, this is a band to some degree that is not about a casual listening experience.
Yeah, you generally don't get it on the first listen, and you can with this one. I hear what you're saying now. I got you.
I listened to this, and
But is that necessarily a bad thing?
No, it's not. But from someone who spent these like all these years listening, I kind of felt like, man, is
that was too easy. That was too easy.
It's so, and to some degree, like that could be a good thing if you're trying to recruit or introduce new people. Absolutely.
But all you have to do is look at what comes next, and it's not the case. So,
So, I mean, if you want to go back,
Had he come out with part 2 Hallucinogen that was even more, with maybe like Kenny G sax solo on it or something like that, I'd be like, all right, dude, now you fucking jumped the shark. But this album's beautiful, I think. So,
Peter, did you want to say anything about the atmospheric black metal aspect of this at all, or did you have anything to add?
Well, I suppose for me, listening to black metal and being into black metal for so long, I suppose that all black metal to some extent has an atmosphere. But for me, it was always black. Everything's black metal, and then in recent years, it seems to be atmospheric black metal is now this new subgenre of black metal. And when I kind of look at it, is, well, what's the difference? Well, it's black metal without the kind of grit, without that kind of piss and vinegar type attitude. It's more probably cerebral type black metal. It's comforting black metal in a way. I mean, I didn't know. I'm not sure if I mentioned at the start, but it was very Cascadian black metal. I mean, you have bands like Wolves in the Throne Room, I suppose, were one of the main ones that came along in the early thousands and brought that kind of style to the more popular sort of, more awareness anyway within the community. But yes, I mean, when I listened to it and I noted down just what I was hearing from it, that's the kind of style he was going with. Maybe that was a bit safer than normal. Like we've kind of mentioned, it's more accessible. It doesn't leave you. It's not unnerving. It isn't that challenging to listen that we've heard from the likes of Mort, for example, or even the previous album. Do you know what I mean? It's a safer type of black metal. Yeah. And I don't know if that's black metal that's being brought to the masses over time. And that's what people maybe want to hear nowadays. Right. Black metal was always supposed to be nonconformist, awkward, make you feel uncomfortable, that you're listening to this stuff and you're going to go to hell and your soul's going to burn, you know.
But the one thing, if I might interrupt a sec, is the one thing about Blut Aus Nord is there's never been the usual satanic crap or they've never sunk to that level, so to speak. Kind of like Enslaved never did. Enslaved never did that trip either, and that's why I think they're such a special band from that second wave thing. I mean, look, I love Dissection and everything and those bands, but they do sort of sometimes get into the common tropes of black metal, and he's never done that. He's always been more about esoteric things, things of spirituality and the human condition and the earth and all that stuff. And I just, but I get what you guys are saying. Let's be honest though, Vinzval's not going to be on the cover of Kerrang, or, you know what I mean? He's not going to be doing he's clearly, I guarantee if we reached out to him to do an interview, he would not come on and do a live interview on a live stream. Yeah.
Well, I think Vinzval, and I'm glad you mentioned Enslaved. These are artists who've transcended black metal, but at the same time, that's the most black metal spirit. They've done their own thing. They've taken a different path than normal, the left-hand path. Well, they've gone down the left-hand path and took another left. So they have, you know what I mean? They have gone to done their own thing. So.
Very good. Very good. Kellen, I don't think you have to worry that they're going to have like a Billboard number 3 with a bullet with the next Blut Aus Nord.
No, I don't ever think that's going to be this project. But like, I think to your point, I know you mentioned Saturnian Poetry in sort of comparison, or you'd link them together, and kind of having this sort of like cohesiveness, or the songs have a similarity in between them,
right?
Kind of deal. I think they're also well-tread paths to some degree. Like
I agree.
And I think they share that trait. They're still tremendous records, but
yes.
I think
you're not wrong about that. There's a common thread through all those tracks on Hallucinogen that are similar, yet I think. Oh, what happened there? Oops. They're similar yet. Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't realize I was off. They're similar yet there's enough uniquely going on in each track to have its own identity. And I think if really if I were to take all the best elements of Cosmosophy, some of the best elements of probably the whole 777 trilogy, mix in a little bit of Memoria Vetusta, I think you come out with Hallucinogen.
Okay, so I think we can transition here, and we got the last record here in 2022.
Right on. Let me just mention one quick thing.
Go for it.
And you have the dates there on these, the Liber, what once was?
Yes.
I have very quick notes on that.
Okay, so do you want to go to?
Well, I'm going to talk about them as a whole because I listened to them 1, 2, 3, bang, bang, bang. When did they come out again? I think the very first one was vinyl only, and that was 2012.
2010.
No,
2010 was the first What Once Was.
Okay.
And then second comes out in 2012, and third comes out here in 2013.
Okay. So it's 3 essentially EPs. I think the first 2 are 2 tracks, and I think the last one is 6 tracks, I believe. I'm not sure what the purpose of these were as far as, whether Deba Murti wanted something to flood the, or whether Vinzval just was like, I got this stuff I want to put out, but I don't really want to pigeonhole it into anything specific. I had never listened to this, and I honestly had I thought I had read that these were I don't know why, I thought they were like demos or something, right? So I kind of did a little bit of quick perusing before we started the stream, about 2 hours, 2.5 hours before we started the stream. I got to tell you guys, don't snooze on these. Way, way, way better. And I will say, the first 2 parts have a lot of, weirdly, have a lot of Autopsy influence. Yes. They're far more death metal. I know Peter's looking at me like, what the fuck are you talking about?
I'm just thinking, well, I brought up The Cure. I brought up The Orb. I brought up Ecto 1.
And Geoff
And
brings
yet,
up
when you
Autopsy.
mentioned Autopsy, that's probably stranger to me than all those 3.
You did have a Pestilence reference, I think.
And Pestilence, that's right, yes. And the vocals, yeah.
The guitar tones and the more doomy riffs. There's some doom on here. And this was the last thing I listened to, so I wasn't, because I knew we weren't. I asked you if you'd listened, and I'm like, well, I'm just going to be the only one talking about it. I gotta put a little more time into it, but I was pretty impressed by what I heard, and I thought, I got to go back to that. So, just saying, guys, it might be something you want to go YouTube and check out and see if I'm either clinically insane because I listen to Deus Salutis Meae too much, or if I just don't know what Autopsy sounds like. I own all their albums, so I think I do. But there's something about these 3 EPs, and they're pretty long. I think it's 128 minutes of music. So whatever that turns out to be, 60, whatever. You do the math. I'm not good at math right now. Huh?
Or 2 hours. 2 hours of music.
Oh, yeah, I guess it would be. No, wait. No, it was 60 plus 20. It was like 88 minutes is what it is total. Don't snooze on them. You might find something that you really like there. So that's all I'll say about them because I don't really know anything. I don't know how easy they seem to be. Fairly easy to find. So Peter's gonna be listening to them after he gets off here before the stream. He's going to be like, thanks a lot, asshole. I just ordered those too.
Yes, I was looking forward to a break from Blut Aus Nord. Dive in again.
Are we ready for Disharmonia?
Yep. Let's do it.
Okay. Move into it here. So just released this past May, right? This is the more recent or the most recent full length from Blut Aus Nord. And we were talking about this being linked to Hallucinogen, but if you want to go for it, I'll give you the stage here, Peter, if you want to talk about Disharmonia and what your thoughts are.
Yeah, I suppose still trying to digest it all. Really, I don't think I've given it as much time as it deserves at the minute because I've been pretty busy since it came out. But for me, I suppose I mentioned in the last album, I think Sven's Fowl was taking some happy drugs and he was on a happy trip. And I think he thought, well, I wonder what the opposite of this would have been if I took a bad trip. And this is what he's done. I have read a few things about it being kind of his Lovecraftian type album. I'm not overly familiar with Lovecraft. I know about Cthulhu and all the rest of it. So I'll just take people's word for it. But for me, a few things I've noted down is that it is a nightmarish album. And it's one of those albums that it's unsettling from the start. And I'm trying to put my finger on it, but it's almost like you're stuck, trapped in some kind of building, but you can hear the horrors going on in the rooms next to you, and you're just waiting for it to come to you. And it's just that fear, and it's like there's something always lurking there. And looking at the artwork, I don't know if it's some kind of creature coming towards you, or if you're sitting in that building that was in hostel and you're waiting for some guy to walk in who's paid a lot of money so he can torture you to death. I don't know. But yeah, I just, the whole way through it, it's just like, it's menacing, it's foreboding. Like I think it's the song That Cannot Be Dreamed. I think that's one that really stood out for me so far. That intro to it, those noises, it kind of put me in that place, in that building. Something's approaching me here, and I don't like the sound of it. It's not going to end well. There is some tension at the end of that song, and you do get some relief towards the end of it. But in Finn's Fowl's world, that's only ever going to be fleeting. You know, you're on to something else next. I mean, even the next track after that, Kenzie Mason, I think that's how I pronounce it. I mean, again, that's put you back in that place again. There's some kind of evil or horrors being committed all around you, and it's only a matter of time before it ends up in your door. I've loads more notes here about each song, but I think overall that's the kind of feeling I had walking away from that. I've been on a bad trip before, and it was very similar, to be fair.
Was this a bad trip album for you, Geoff?
Yeah, you guys are gonna have to deal with the fan. I hope it's not too loud. I'll shield it from. Okay, so this is the one I've had the least amount of exposure to because it came out in May. We were going to do this thing on my channel back in May, kind of in conjunction with this, and then my health kind of took a spill. But I've probably had 3 or 4 listens now. I think 4. Wow, this is not hallucinogen. This is some of the dark parts of Mort mixed with that disorientating sound that he started to perfect on work with Transforms. There's that's in there. There's this warping and twisting and bending of the notes and even the I'm thinking his MIDI controller or whatever he's his keyboard, whatever he's using to do the synth sounds, man. That roller wheel is getting a hell of a workout, man, because it's just it's all. And what it feels like listening to this, if I had to draw an analogy, is when you go to like one of those state fairs or your local town fair, and you walk into the mirror room where everything's distorted and you can't fucking You can't lock in on you, and you're like, this is trippy, man. Especially if you're stoned, which I've done back in my youth. I haven't done it as an adult, but I can imagine if I did it as an adult, what that would be like. I'd be like, man, I'm gonna have a fucking panic attack, or I'm gonna have an anxiety attack out here. I don't want to feel this way, disoriented like this around all these people. That's kind of what it feels like. Let me hit you with some quick notes. It's pretty short. Um, if I had to summarize my impression of this album in a few words, it would be dense, oppressive, hauntingly atmospheric, and harrowingly beautiful. Chance of the Deep Ones opens, and it's basically a claustrophobic nightmare soundscape you are thrown into, harkening back to bits of Work That Transforms and Mort as far as atmosphere. It's not the epic, almost joyful, uplifting vibe of Hallucinogen. It's actually incredibly cinematic, but intensely frightening and harrowing, yet melodic and catchy. No question he's got a lot of new plugins to use on this synth side of things. This shit's kind of terrifying, and yet it's very hypnotically addictive. A lot more ambient droning and synths this time around. What's that say? Something of the old Dreamer? Tales?
If you can pull it up here.
Tales of the Old
Yeah,
Dreamer?
Tales of the Old Dreamer.
Okay, because I had some misspellings there. And what's the next one? Pomona.
Into the Woods.
Yeah.
Third. What's the third track?
Into the Woods.
Oh, Into the Woods. Oh, wait. What am I reading there? Something again. I don't know. Wails and moves like a behemoth, devouring all in its path. This shit is so heavy and drug sounding. Like it's being sonically manipulated to undulate like a snake burrowing into the open entrails of a dead beast. Yeah, I come up with some weird shit. It's so heavy, swirling nightmarish guitars and chants that are deep in the mix that are so incredibly dense. Into the Woods moans and drones and swirls into your ear holes like a sickness, as does the Neptune's Eyes with pummeling drums and sickening synths and guitars that swirl and pitch sickly in the mix. This shit's almost like having sensory overload and sensory deprivation at the same time. If you get what I'm saying, it's sensory overload, yet it's sensory deprivation all at the same time. It honestly makes you feel very uneasy in a weird sort of way. Listening to this while driving through a dark forest completely alone might not be advisable. This is probably his darkest, most beautifully ugly album so far, like one long bad dream that won't end and that you can't wake up from no matter how hard you try. You're stuck in this terrifying hypnagogic state of unrest. That which cannot be dreamed fires up with huge droning synth patches that whine into existence behind the chants and sickly swirling guitar figures while drums unleash and propel the song into another nightmarish landscape. In the background, there are scary choirs of agony. This shit's not for the faint of heart, and frankly, could easily be a soundtrack to a much scarier version of The Exorcist or The Omen. Keziah Mason, next up, probably my least favorite song on the album. Kind of drags a little bit and is too derivative of the other tracks. Not bad, just not outstanding. The last track has lots of disembodied voices, screaming and moaning in pain, howling in agony, and distorted droning and wailing chords. It's the final culmination of the nightmare where you realize upon waking your eyes and mouth have been sewn shut and you try to scream for help, but you can't break out of this horrific nightmare you are trapped in forever. I guess my only real criticism is by the end of the album, I'm truly drained, and my fear of falling asleep tonight and descending into a nightmare is palpably real. And I'm not kidding about that. I'm exhausted, but I'm a little scared to sleep tonight. This is an easy 9 out of 10 for me and probably will be more with more listens, and then I kind of touched on that whole, this is allegedly Vinzval, WD, and Goss. But again, I'm really not convinced that those guys are real. So I don't know. There you go. It wasn't as short as I thought it was. I apologize.
And eyes and mouth sewn shut. Yeah, that was.
Yeah.
Human centipede style.
I got the Hostel, you've Human Centipede.
I'm
You
a
know,
twist
mix them together.
fucker. Yeah, that is one movie I've never seen and I don't want to see, but I've heard about it. I don't want to see it. That's not, yeah. No thanks.
Okay, well, I'll jump over here. I guess first or thoughts like this is an atmosphere that I like. This makes sense to me. I guess is the first thing I thought. It was like, yeah, this is the Blut Aus Nord that I am sort of not just expecting, but like does something unique that a lot of other bands really can't mirror or duplicate. I was trying to think as to where I would potentially like. I think we all agree that there is some pairing here, or there's a real relationship between Hallucinogen and Disharmonium. But I guess the first one, to your point, Geoff, about like the guitar work, that's the first thing that stood out to me on this record. Is it sounded familiar to where like potentially even going back to what started on Mythical Beast. Just that kind of like abrasive where the chords slide into one another. I think that's a good way that you described it. They don't sort of reconcile, or you don't have.
Well, I think that really started hard on Work That Transforms. That's where I remember it. I remember that drippy, almost like he can't find the note, like he's searching for the note, but yet somehow it still sounds melodic and it still works for your ear. That's just my take.
Sure, but I think what we would agree on is like it takes that quality in a way that I would not associate so closely with industrial.
Oh music. Yeah.
This to me is like taking ingredients from that and moving it towards something that is this kind of dream world that we got previously on Hallucinogen.
Far more cinematic, I think is the word.
Right. Yeah. Just the scope and size of everything feels like
epic.
You would find in a dream where you're trying to find the limits of where this nightmare ends.
Right.
But there's no escape for you. You just kind of keep on, surrounded in the same sort of horror. So
I made the analogy with Hallucinogen that you were on this ascent up. This is the exact opposite. You're on an ascent down. It is like you are, those big giant slides at like amusement parks that have the undulations that you know what I'm talking about, where you sit on a rug or something like that, and they're long and they fucking zip you down. It's like you get on one of those that just keeps going and going and going, and all around you, everything is melting, disappearing, and fucking imploding, and you're like, what did I do to be here? I don't want to be here.
Right. You took the too much of the drug, and now you want off of the high, and you can't get off the high fast enough. And
that's a great analogy right there. It's perfect. That's it. I don't know if we can get it any better. You took too much of the drug. Your buddy said, no, take 5 mushroom caps. And you're like, are you sure? Yeah, don't worry about it, dude. And 16 days later, you're still tripping.
Sure.
That's what it is.
And your buddy's left you on your own.
And your buddy's left you. He's like, sorry, dude, I don't know what the fuck's wrong with you, but that's your problem, not mine. I got to go to work.
Yeah.
That's perfect, man.
But I did really enjoy this record, but it feels very early, like in a transition. Like I'm really interested to see what happens next. Because
where does he go next?
Yeah, but
does he do Bee Gees covers, or does he do all Battery covers, or?
I really, if you had told me that we would get Hallucinogen, I would have said that's not Blut Aus Nord. So I think to some degree, like he's turned a corner, and whatever he's developing, you know, is still early. But
You know, it would not shock me at all if he came out with a Hallucinogen Part 2. Not named that, but you know what I mean. It wouldn't shock me if he goes back now to the more astral and just sort of bounces us from one extreme to another. And that's the cool thing about this guy. I'm going to make a dichotomous statement here.
okay.
You don't really know what to expect from this guy, but in a way you do. Because by that I mean you don't know where it's going to go, but generally speaking, when you get on the ride, you're all in. You're all in. You're either all in or you're not really a fan of BAN, because my sense is that most people that like BAN, they're lifers. They're in. If they don't like it, they're kind of I can give or take it. Nah, I don't really. I got one. That's good enough for me. You know what I mean? That's my perception of, I think we're all lifers here, some way, shape, or form. Even if we don't own every single album, we're intrigued to hear every album, and we want to know what's next around that. In that fun house, we're scared to walk around the corner, but we just can't help ourselves. We got them.
Right.
So that's my take on it. And when I first heard the 2 tracks that they released to wherever they came out on, I guess they came out on Bandcamp and then on YouTube, I was like, holy fucking shit. And one thing we didn't add, none of us said it. I'm surprised. I'll throw it out there. There's been a lot of Cthulhu mythos around this album. Probably because of the artwork, I guess, and maybe Vidsval threw that out there somewhere along the line, or maybe the record label did. I don't know, but I get it. Subterranean, deep in the tunnels, oozing, seeping slime. It's all there. It's fucking sick,
But
is what it is.
in,
And
in my notes, I have down for the 4th track, Neptune's Eye.
yeah,
For me, that song sounds like the cover art. And when I say that, it's an eerie song. And I've got down here, there's his vocals they're really deep in the mix, but they're kind of gurgly, sort of bubbly
yes, gurgling.
sound. And I put here the sound of some kind of bass lurking in the abyss. It's there. It's not attacking. And this is the feeling I got when I mentioned about it's almost like you're trapped in some kind of building, and there's horrors going on in the rooms around you, and you know it's going to come to you. It's just the horror isn't with you right now. It's not present, but you know it's coming, and you don't know when. And he doesn't give you any hints of when it's going to be, and that adds to the fear.
Something's down there. You don't know what it is, and you really don't want to know what it is. You really don't want to know. And it's I love this album. It's definitely in my top 5 or 6 easily. And I was expecting something more like Hallucinogen, and I'm glad it didn't go that way.
Right.
Personally. So,
Do you have any? So as we wrap up here, any last words or thoughts that you want to get out on Blut Aus Nord? Or
for anyone that's picking this up and watching this, we've thrown a couple of albums out there that we suggested you maybe start with, and some that are way more harrowing and dense and scary that we like, that you probably maybe would want to start with, but maybe you do if you're into that thing. I think it's again, we don't really know if it's a band or not, or if it's just one dude. If it's one dude, it's pretty fucking impressive what this guy does. I think one of the big criticisms I've ever kind of heard about BAN is that all his stuff kind of sounds the same. And it's like, what the fuck are you listening to, man? Yeah, there's a common thread of his voice in it. And I don't mean his singing voice. I mean his writing voice, his style, okay? But, man, you must be listening to something that I'm not when you say all of his stuff sounds the same, because I don't hear that. But I would say, dip your toe in lightly, but don't expect immediate, feedback. but go into it thinking I'm gonna need to digest this album at least a couple times. And then if I hate it, I hate it, and I walk away, and I'm saved from buying 19 albums or whatever it is, and all the 9 million different variants and all the really cool shit that he, is coming out with. That unfortunately is over in France and costs a lot more money. Like shirts, you can't get a fucking shirt over here in the States for under $40. That's a little steep for me for a t-shirt, but it's one of my favorite artists. I'm so glad you decided to kind of arrange this and make it happen, Kellen and Peter. We've been threatening to drag you in, and we finally dragged you in. So now you know what has to happen, right? You know what has to happen. He's like, I haven't had enough wine for that tonight.
I need to
But
crack
yeah,
open that.
this has been killer hanging out with you guys and chewing this up. And I think, a lot of the other ones I see out there are generally ranking videos. We didn't do that. We decided to really get into the meat and gristle of these things. And, if I had to pick my top five, I would say Cosmosophy, Hallucinogen, Memoria Vetusta 2, probably the new one, and probably Memoria Vetusta 3, or maybe one of Desanct or Sect. They'd all be right there in that, thing. But there's a wealth of incredible stuff here that goes. How many years did we say? Is it 30?
He's come up to 30.
Yeah, I mean, almost. If you count the demos, it's 93. So
That's insane, man. I mean, it's just nuts. And the guy's how old again?
he's supposedly
43
born in 80, so he's 42. Yeah.
42.
Wow.
Yeah, and that, for me, that's the thing to listen to all these albums, is that there isn't a bad one. I mean, I suppose you talk about ranking. I suppose coming into this, I had an idea of what I thought might be my favorites.
We'll throw
coming out of it,
oh, you're not sure
now. Well, coming out of it, I'd probably say top 3: Mort,
Oh shit, I missed
Thule, and potentially Dialogue for the Stars, which wouldn't have been my top 3 going in.
That's the thing. There's 10 albums or 12 albums. You go, yeah, on any given day, I'm totally cool with listening to that. How many of your favorite bands have that many albums that you're like, yeah, I can't wait? I mean, even Rush, my favorite band, that has whatever, I don't know. I think they have 19 albums out. There's 4 or 5 that I rarely ever listen to. So it is what it is. I say, if you're checking this out, that means you're interested or you know a lot about it. And we may even get some people in the comments that say, dude, you fucked this up, or hey, you need to know this or whatever. That's cool. We didn't come on here proclaiming that we were the experts on the internet about Blut Aus Nord, but we're guys that all enjoy this a lot and, enjoy each other's company and opinions and respect each other. And that's why we did it. So if there's something in here we didn't get right, let us know. Don't be a dick about it.
Yeah. Well, I'll hold my hands up. And like I said before, I think in part 1, Geoff, when you asked me to do the deep dive, I thought, well, I'm not that big a fan of Blut Aus Nord.
Uh-huh.
But I must be, to some extent.
Oh, I think you are. I think you're bigger than. As I said, I think there's 2 types of people with Blut Aus Nord. Well, maybe 3. There's some casuals that like 1 or 2 albums, and they're like, yeah, it's good enough for me. There's ones that check out 1 or 2 and go. In fact, I think Tyler said that the other night, didn't he? Didn't he say, I listened to 2 of them. I didn't like them. I know what they sound like. It's like, dude, they got which 2 albums did you check out? And I think he said Mort was one of them, which I can understand. That's a difficult one to get your head around on a first listen, but you just can't listen to one album here and go, oh yeah, I know what these guys are about. You just can't. And if you do, you're cutting your nose off to spite your face. And then there's the guys like us that I truly think are either closet lifers or full-on lifers. I'm pretty much a lifer that's out there. I just don't own everything because I can't buy everything right now, or I'd have it all. And then, I think you guys are more lifers than you think you are, or you wouldn't be sitting here, I think.
Yeah, I mean, this is when I think of the most important bands that came to life when I started to get into metal, generally speaking, across the board,
Right.
that are still putting out records now, this has to be included. They're incredibly personal band for me in that regard, and I think in the recent decades, one of the most influential bands, completely unique. There was no one. I mean, I can't. That covers this many different styles of music, and has been influenced from different parts of extreme music, across the board. So,
But yeah, there's not a lot of how many of your favorite bands, like, I threw out Rush. Can you name a band that you really love that's got that many albums that most of them are very listenable and you don't have a problem going and listening to?
I mean,
Maybe one or two.
what I would say is like bands that I feel disconnected to. Another one that jumps to mind would be like the Ruins of Everest.
Okay, yeah, that's a good one. That's a good one.
Where
I don't own anything from and should. So,
I mean, they're very unique. They came around, it sort of peaked. I mean, they're a different band because there's a project that was related to them that came around earlier in Nagelfar, but
Nagelfar.
Right.
Yeah,
I love Nagelfar. I like
I've only listened. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
So, I suppose because I was a fan of Nagelfar in the 90s, I tend to prefer them more, but I do have most of the Ruins of Everest.
But for me, it's just one of those bands that like came to sort of on my radar in the 2000s, when I was at a young adult in my early 20s, and I've kept pace with them now decades later, and are completely, kind of avant-garde, if you want to use that term, but are unique, and important, influential, and on a short list of bands where I feel like they ushered me into a certain kind of music early on in my life, and in that sense have kept me listening through the years because of how influential and unique they are. I think those same sort of, I can describe Blut Aus Nord in the same way.
Yeah, I agree.
This was a lot of fun, and this, Geoff, you put this together, you started this, and I kind of just took up the mantle to keep it going. Peter, I'm so happy
man,
to jump on, and it's really kind of you to donate your time, and I know that maybe getting on camera will be a thing in the future, but if people, I will put links to your channel, Geoff. Make sure people will check out the Metal Vault on Instagram, because like multiple people have said, great content, really unique collection.
Oh yeah, dude. You put so much effort into it. It's funny, when I started putting some stuff on Instagram, I was going to do, I think I started to kind of do what you were doing. I did like Payne's Gray and one or two other albums. I was like, man, and you heard me rattle off some of the stuff that was coming to mind that, on some of these albums. I can write, but I'm lazy as fuck. And I was like, man, this is way too much work. I'll just read Peter's stuff. And then you pull this stuff out, and I'm like, man, this dude's collection has to be fucking epic. So, Peter, if you did do this and you came up, maybe even like I said, doing what you do on Instagram on camera, 15, 20-minute videos just talking about one CD, blah, 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 blah. Man, dude, I'm serious. I bet you'd start blowing doors off with subs. I just think you would.
Thank you. Well, thank you to both of you guys for including me in this, and obviously Callum for obviously going to show this in your channel and coordinating the whole thing. But yeah, it has given me the sort of impetus really to start thinking about a channel, or if not even more deep dives. If you do any more of them, I'd be happy enough to jump on.
But yeah, Callan, thanks so much, man. I mean, I love, and you know what I really love talking about with you guys the most? And I'm not cutting myself down here, because I think I'm a fairly intellectual, fairly educated guy, but you guys were talking about stuff in these albums that was pretty heady, and I just was like, man, let them go, because I don't really know. Unlike you two guys, I did not sit down and start threading together storylines and narratives. I just let the music wash over me like I do with all music. And I'm not as I'm a little bit more Cro-Magnon when it comes to music. Just come, kick me in the nuts, fucking punch me in the face, and make me say, I want to hear more of that shit, like Deus Mia Salata, whatever. Salutis Meae. That's what I want to do with music. So thank you guys.
Awesome. Thank you guys so much. And
Love you guys, man. Thank you so much for
I'll talk to you
including
soon.
me.
Thanks. That was
All right.
fun.
Peace out.
Take care.